As required by Missouri Statute 62.110, the Board of Education is holding a public hearing on the proposed tax rates for the 2020 tax year. After the tax rate hearing and later in the combined meeting, the tax rates will be voted on by the Board of Education. Deputy Superintendent Carol Embry will provide additional information. Carol, that's your cue.
Thank you. So, as Dr. Leonard noted, this is relative to a requirement of Missouri statute in that we must have you approve levies prior to September 1 so that we can get those submitted to the state auditor's office. And this year is a little interesting in that the Greene County Assessor's Office has implemented a new software system. So they're running a bit behind on getting all of the parcels entered. So for our purposes, we are going to be compliant with Missouri statute by getting our levy submitted, knowing that we will be moving forward with resubmitting it with more accurate data. Excuse me. We anticipate the new data to be received by the end of August, and then we'll resubmit with the state auditor's office. So in addition to Missouri statute 67.110, we are compliant with board policy DC2 through this process. I will point out to you that the debt service levy is increasing by that second phase of the 9-cent increase that was voted by our patrons for approval at the April 2019 ballot. And currently the levy calls for a total of 3.64 for operating, 73 for the debt service levy. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer those.
Questions for Carol at this time?
Was the software change just a Springfield thing or a statewide?
It's actually relative to Greene County.
Okay.
So any taxing jurisdictions in Greene County are affected by
Greene
this.
County. Okay, I wasn't sure.
Any other questions? As you all know, we will vote on this later in our board meeting. So if there's no other questions at this time, we would invite members of the public who would like to comment on the proposed 2020 tax rates. Any comments on the 2020 proposed tax rates? Okay, seeing none, we will adjourn the public hearing on the proposed tax levy, and we will now move forward to our next agenda item, which is the pledge of the flag. If you would like to join me in saying the pledge to the flag. The flag keeps moving. It is currently right here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our next agenda item is the approval of the agenda. The recommended action is that the board approve the agenda as presented. Do I have someone who would like to make that motion?
So moved.
Bill, is there someone who would like to second that? Second. Sarita, any discussion? Hearing none, we can vote now. Oh, I'm sorry, I must have hit the wrong button.
Did. I almost hit that one too.
Tell her.
Kathy, can you change that?
I sure can.
Aye, yes, thank you. Sorry. Okay, there we go. Okay. Our next agenda item is public comments to address agenda items. Kathy, so far I have 3.
You have 3. I can select.
Tammy will bring any others.
Okay, all right. So far I have 3, and before I read I'll go ahead and read the public comments. The Board of Education welcomes comments from the audience about the issues being discussed. It is recommended that the request to speak be submitted prior to the beginning of the meeting. Comments will be limited to 5 minutes for each speaker and will be timed by the board secretary. It is inappropriate to address the board about individual students and individual staff members by naming by name an open meeting. If you have any concerns about individuals, these concerns should be addressed to the appropriate administrative supervisors, either in the schools or in the district office. The board uses this time in our meeting to listen to comments and or concerns for the public, but will not comment or engage with speakers during the meeting. If you have materials that you want to share, please provide them to the board secretary prior to speaking, and she will distribute them to the board members. Thank you. I have four individuals who would like to speak on agenda items, and they are all addressing the reentry plan. And since you're all able to sit here in our limited capacity room, we appreciate you being here, and we also want you to know, in case anybody were to leave after you speak, that we would encourage you to stick around and hear from the reentry plan that is going to be the additional details that are going to be available tonight, and also hear board comments to that end. So our first person is Karen Parnell. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm going to go ahead and take my mask off.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, good evening. My name is Karen Parnell. I know some of you, and hopefully you all know my name by now. I sent you all a letter requesting a virtual start to the year, dated July 29th, I think it was. A couple of weeks ago, Claudette Riley published an article in the paper about all of the different letters and communications you all receive. And I noticed that there was no mention whatsoever of my letter. I also noticed that it was mentioned in the article that the board had responded to every single letter they had received, which is not true in my case. I never received a response to my letter. So I reached out to Claudette a week or so ago, and then this Sunday, perhaps you saw the front page of the paper, my letter, parts of my letter were published in the newspaper. Since this came out on Sunday, I have received an outpouring of support for me and for what I have done to speak up for the teachers in the district. A number of teachers have reached out via text message saying that they really appreciated my thoughts and my desire to speak out for them. I've received emails from teachers. I've received emails from community members. I've received phone calls. I received a very touching phone call from a woman I've never met who just happened to have my phone number because of a Jury alumni connection. And she thanked me for speaking up for her grandchildren and trying to do what I could to protect her grandchildren. And honestly, that phone call brought me to tears. So many of us are so scared. And I think we have very good reason to be scared. The current situation in the state of Missouri is not pretty. Deborah Birx was here today. She was in Arkansas yesterday, and today she met with Governor Parson, in which she said, you need to wear your masks. Everybody wear your masks, no matter if you're a Democrat or Republican. I'm not quoting directly, but, and she emphasized that nobody needs to be hanging out in backyard parties. Missouri is considered a red zone right now. When I wrote the letter, the high of cases for Springfield, Greene County was 74, I think. Now we've had a one-day high of 95, and the current number of cases is over 2,000. When the school district was shut down in March, there were around 100 cases. So it's really hard for me and for so many of us teachers to understand how it is safe for us to be in the classroom now when it wasn't safe 6 months ago. Every high school in Springfield Public School District has had a case and has had to quarantine people. Every single high school. And my request was for a virtual start for middle and high school students, because you cannot keep them in stable groups. They're going to be passing in the halls, they're going to be intermixing, they're always going to be going from class to class. At the elementary level, those groups will be stable. Those kids will be with the same kids all the time. So I'm not asking for a virtual start at the elementary level. I would like to see a virtual start at the middle and high school level. A lot of the focus that the district has communicated thus far has been on surface cleaning and making sure that things aren't touched by people that haven't been cleaned. When in reality, the thing that you all need to be focusing on is ventilation and any kind of ventilation system in place. If we did a virtual year, that would give us time to deal with this ventilation issue. If we just started virtually for the first quarter, that would give us an additional 2 months to figure out some of these details that haven't been figured out yet. As I mentioned in my letter, the statistics, the mortality statistics, based on the number of teachers in the district, 34 teachers will die, 13 students will die. And that's not okay with me. In our faculty meeting yesterday, every single teacher indicated that they were very excited to see students and to connect with them and to build relationships. That's what we all want, we're teachers. But every single educator, when asked about their fears and concerns, indicated that they were scared to death of catching COVID, taking it to their families, catching it themselves, and dying. Please, 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 let's start virtually for middle and high schools this year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Tim Havens is up next. Good evening, Tim.
Good evening. Thank you. This lady was very courageous. I know she made a statement that bothered me, or there was a statement in the paper that some teachers felt intimidated, didn't want to sign something because they thought would be repercussions on their job. I also have found that true in some things that I researched. Teachers did not want to speak out, and that really bothers me. Is the virus contained in our area? We had the largest single day we've ever had last week, which she referred to. It was a peak, and national leaders, Dr. Fucci and so forth, those leaders in the medical field say we shouldn't open our schools unless we have achieved containment. And I don't believe we've achieved containment. We had 60 new cases, we have 970 active cases, and we have a total of 2,078 cases. If the health department supports your decision to open, why isn't Clay Goddard here at this meeting? Why isn't somebody from the health department here to say, yes, we support this, we condone it, we give it our blessing? But I don't think that's the case, and that man isn't here, and I think somebody should be here representing that part of the community. I don't think any of these Cox or Mercy, I don't think they've condoned this either. I don't think they've given it the blessing. They might have advised on how to handle this or how to handle that, but I don't think they've given it their okay and their stamp of approval. So who has said this is an acceptable risk? Can you tell me who you talked with, who advised you in the medical field that has credentials? Who has okayed this? Y'all are not experts. You don't have medical knowledge. So I think for something this serious, there should be somebody here to give it their stamp of approval. What is a statement from the teachers union? Have they okayed this? Have they made any statement at all about it? Did this board fully participate in the arguments, yay and nay, for opening the school system and with the conditions you've decided on? I don't think so. I don't think they got to hear all the different arguments and different people speak and the ins and outs of it, so I don't think this board is totally prepared to make a decision. And this board did not vote on the opening of schools. It did not vote on the conditions on which the school would open. And I think that's real overstep by the administration because you all are elected officials, you're our representatives. This is an item that affects the whole community. It's very self-centered of the school system to just think we can make this decision in the vacuum. City Council has done a lot of work on this. The Health Department's done a lot of work. We've all sacrificed in this community, and what you do will affect the community. It could start a resurgence, and yet you're doing it like you're in the vacuum. Why hasn't City Council talked with you and have somebody here from City Council to say, yes, we condone this? But I don't see any of that. You're gambling with the lives of children. And before you start this, let's say that you're gambling, you don't know the outcome. Let's say that you fail. Let's say the results are far worse than you thought they would be. Where is your line? What's your criteria for when to call this off and to back up? Is it how many deaths? 1, 2 deaths? A family sick? A grandpa dies? What's your criteria before we start this? When will you know this has failed? I think we'd be smart if we waited, and we're risking a year. Let's say we risk a year. Over here, we're risking lives of children. And what are we gaining over here? We're gaining an education that's less than what we did 2 years ago. It's not the same quality, and yet we're risking life to do it. And over here, if we back off and we look at it every quarter, semesters, we're analyzing it then, and maybe we'll have a vaccine within a year. All the national leaders, health leaders say we'll have a vaccine within a year. So maybe we lost a year, but we didn't lose any lives. And we got a vaccine, or at least we waited till the hotbed cooled down. I think your present decision is ill-advised. I think it represents negligence, lack of preparation.
Thank you, Tim.
You bet.
We'll call up Chris Stevenson up next. Good evening, Chris.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Chris Stevenson. I'm actually a Marine Corps veteran and an Iraqi freedom veteran. I have a son who will be in 7th grade this year, and he has an IEP. The SBS reentry plan concerns me because of what happened last semester. Despite my son's best efforts to work with his instructors, he still ended up having several D's due to the online instruction. He was also told by his IEP instructor not to worry about failing his PE because he needed work on his reading and writing. And his PE assignments were actually a written PE log. My son will tell you that he needs online assistance and technical support. So my question to the board is, if we have a masking ordinance that works, then why are we reducing the amount of days that children are in school? It's a dereliction of duty on behalf of the school to have these children attend online classes. My son needs face-to-face time with a trained professional in order to learn what he needs to in order to become a successful adult. However, it's not only my children that I'm raising concerns about. The public school system provides a number of essential services to the children of this district. The school system provides educational instruction, supports the development of social and emotional skills, creates a safe environment for learning, addresses nutritional needs, and facilitates physical activities. The available evidence suggests that if children do get infected, they are far less likely to suffer severe symptoms. The CDC states that death rates among school-aged children are much lower than among adults. At the same time, the harms attributed to closing schools on the social, emotional, behavioral health, and economic well-being and academic achievement of children in both the short and long term are well known and significant. Further, the lack of in-person education options disproportionately harms low-income and minority children and families. These students are far likely, and with disabilities as well, these students are far less likely to have access to private instruction and care, and are far more likely to rely on key school-supported resources like food programs and educational services, counseling, and after-school programs to meet basic developmental needs. children are at a lower risk of contraction and transmission. I'd also like to bring to attention the sharp drop in reported child abuse cases during the transition from in-class learning to online teaching. The Helen Associated Press reported that with the schools closed and teachers unable to report suspected cases of abuse and neglect, child welfare agencies have lost some of their best eyes and ears during the stressful time for families who have lost their jobs and are in lockdown together during the coronavirus pandemic. Sometimes school is the only safe place for children in families with domestic violence situations. This in itself is neglecting the needs of the community. Upon talking to my son's teachers at the end of last school year, most of them stated that a good majority of their students didn't even log on after the transition. We are really leaving learning to chance by doing this. This will also affect families such as mine who depend on the schools in order to make a living. By leaving teaching to the parents, the school system is harming the family structure. I will most likely have to drop out of college in order to be at home with my child. This will have consequences that far outweigh the possibility of contracting an illness that has a 98% survivability rate, in which less than 0.1% of COVID-19 are related deaths, are children, according to the CDC. The CDC states that although relatively rare, flu-related deaths in children occur every year. From 2004 to 2005 to 2018 to 2019, flu-related deaths in children reported to the CDC during regular flu seasons ranged from 37 to 187 deaths. During the H1N1 pandemic, April 15, 2009 to October 2, 2010, 358 pediatric deaths were reported to the CDC. So far in this pandemic, deaths of children are less than in each of the last 5 flu seasons, which was only 64. To my knowledge, the school system is not shut down for either of these illnesses. Springfield has just mandated a masking ordinance to address the illnesses. The masking does work. I will bring to attention the Great Clips case that we had right here in Springfield, where both the infected and the uninfected both wore masks, and while 140 people were exposed, none of that 140 contracted coronavirus. I will conclude by saying that we, the taxpayers, are still paying for a service that is no longer being provided for adequately. Will not be taxed for a service that is no longer provided. Thank you very much.
Not everybody is going to get that kind of praise. I liked it.
Up next is Melisha Colfer? Melisha, okay, sorry. Welcome.
Yeah, my name's Melisha. This is going to be more so elementary related because my daughter's going to be in first grade. But I just have some questions regarding the reentry. With the online learning, I've heard, and kind of the information that I've got hasn't been real concrete, but it's supposed to be about 4 hours on the online learning days. So how is that going to work? Because my thought is there's kids that are going to be maybe at home, but also at centers and stuff. Like my daughter's going to be at her my other daughter's daycare, but they're going to have a school-aged area and stuff. But I just think, how is that going to work? Is there going to be a certain time, and we have to kind of take into effect that these centers and places that these kids might be have their own schedule and agenda. So I'm just kind of wondering how that's going to work.
Can't take your questions that way, but keep going and we're paying attention.
Okay. And with the kids being supplied school supplies, are they going to also receive textbooks and workbooks for the online learning? And how is the social distancing going to work at school as far as recess goes, gym, specials, stuff like that? Because it's hard to just social distance when, doing activities like gym and recess and everything. So how is that going to work? My concern was with when the decision was made and everything parents were only given a week to decide, to figure out what they were going to do with their kids and stuff, and that was not a lot of time. And I understand that, you know, you needed to have decisions to figure out how the school year was going to work and everything, but we really should have been given a little bit more time than just a week, because, you know, a lot of life changes and everything and decisions had to be made, and yeah, so I think that was kind of what I was wondering, and yeah. So
You are asking great questions, and I believe you may hear some answers to your questions in the reentry update presentation that's coming up.
Okay.
So if you want to stay and watch that or watch it online.
Okay.
And I have your number here, and I can put you in direct contact with somebody who can help answer that.
Okay, yeah, because I've gone through the text and information that's been given or sent to me, but it just didn't seem like, I know tomorrow they're supposed to come out with the roster and the schedule and stuff like that, but I figured maybe more was coming along with that, but I wasn't sure yet, so.
We appreciate hearing from you. So I will be in touch with you, or we'll see if you can learn some more tonight.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much. I believe that concludes our public comments for agenda items, and we will move to our next agenda item, which is consent agenda 3.01 through 5.01. Recommended action is that the board approve consent agenda items 3.01 through 5.01. Would somebody like to make that motion?
So moved.
Charles? Somebody like to second that?
Second?
Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, we can now vote. Motion passes. Our next agenda item is the treasurer's report, which will bring our Deputy Superintendent Carol back to the podium.
Good evening again.
Good evening.
So we continue in that time frame where we are still wrapping up the prior year while we embrace the new year. And a few items have been included within the reporting for your review prior to the meeting. I'll highlight for you that our budget amendment request calls for a $500 increase in the revenue budget overall and a zero change to the expenditure budget. There are a few transfers between accounts, but they net to zero. As we landed the prior fiscal year that ended June 30, 2020, our fund balance percentage that we originally projected in the budget information that we shared with you in June, we thought we'd land this year with a 16.19% ending fund balance percentage at June 30, 2021. Currently, that shows itself to be 16.77, but we continue to update that each month, as you're well aware. So we provided again for you the regular reports. If there are any specific questions, I would be happy to answer those.
Any questions for Carol at this time? Okay. Seeing none, the recommended action is that the board approves the treasurer's report as presented.
Make that motion?
Denise, would somebody like to second that?
Second.
Charles, second. Any discussion? Okay, hearing and seeing none, we can now vote. We are waiting on our computers, if anybody's wondering.
Can we do it verbally?
We can take a roll call.
Oh, there it is. Oh, here we go.
There we go.
I just rebooted it.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Moving on to our next agenda item is information reports. The next agenda item is the fall opening update, and our Deputy Superintendent of Operations, Carol Embry, and our Deputy Superintendent of Dr. Nicole Holt will provide an update on the fall opening for 2020. Good evening, welcome.
Good evening, thank you. Get this for you. Let that load. All right. Good evening. Thank you again for the opportunity to come back and reconnect with you on the work of our teams, leaders, and departments related to returning to learning in the reentry process. While much of the information board will be slight review from what we have shared previously, there are adjustments and some modifications that we have made, and so providing you and the public an update to that was important to the team. So I'll remind you that we have provided slide numbers to each of the slides for you to capture and track questions along the way. We'll use a similar format to what we did at the previous reentry share, where we have dedicated specific times throughout the presentation for you to pause, reflect, and ask us some questions at that time. So we'll ask you to use that same structure tonight. So we'll jump right in and get started. So our agenda for this evening is really broken in. We've organized the presentation into 4 sections. So we will start with just a review and a slight process reminder about how we began to design and work around reentry. So again, some of that will be a review, but just to put it in the forefront of your thinking and remind you where we've been. And then we will talk a little bit instructional data-wise. As you know, we have received parent input data as well as staff data relative to returning, and so we'll provide you an update to where that landed. That will also include information about those that opted for which learning option that we have put out for parents. The third section will be on preparation, so just updates to how we have begun to actually prepare for students to arrive either in person or seated next Monday. And then some adjustments, whether that's to programming or other relevant work that we wanted you to be aware of. So we will follow that process tonight to keep you updated and informed. So just as a reminder, these were our initial SPS reentry goals, and they continue to guide the work of our teams. So safety, as you've heard talked about many, many times tonight, both from this side of the table as well as our community side, just continuing to maintain safety at the forefront of our work. Goal 2 is really around choice and flexibility for what learning options families will select. Goal 3 is around equity and opportunities really for our under-resourced and underrepresented students, but we know that pertains to all of our kiddos. And then goal 4 is just continuing to clearly communicate during a very challenging time. And so while these initiated the work, they also continue to guide what we're doing today. Another reminder is just that we developed a process for how we would begin to design around reentry, and those initial work teams of about 70 stakeholders, internal stakeholders, were divided into these 4 areas, and that was how we began our conversations and design around reentry work. So again, health and safety, what social emotional learnings and supports, and the operational side of the house was one of those work groups. The instructional pieces, how we would design learning specifically, and what resources around professional development would look like for our students and our staff was another piece. Equity and access and the work relative to our under-resourced and underrepresented populations was definitely a group that focused and informed each of the other groups. And then our communications and partnership, how we would effectively communicate changes, shifts, and the plan. So those were the teams and the process we outlined last time for you, but again, I wanted to remind you of how that work began and how it was guided. So now we'll get into the meat of the reentry plan. Again, thank you for allowing us to do a little bit of refresher, but we also want you to know that there are changes that live within this section. So you recall that the official Back to SPS plan was released on July 23rd to the public, and so that included these two learning options. So the last time we were gathered together as a board, these were different options. We presented on a 5-day seated option at that time, as well as a 5-day virtual learning. And so that is a shift that we're bringing back to you. The community and you obviously have been apprised of that, but we wanted to remind you now of the options that are available to our SPS families. So parents were given the option to select 2-day in-person learning with a 3-day at-home learning as one option, and then a 5-day virtual learning where students would be supported primarily online, still getting direct instruction and feedback 5 days a week. So those are the two options. What I want to bring back to the forefront of your thinking and let you know about is that all courses, regardless of the delivery mode, so whether a parent selected in-person learning or virtual learning, are built inside of our learning management system in Canvas. So what that means is that we have, students still have availability to all of our adaptive software, all of the curricular resources and ebooks, and additional supplemental supports that they would need, regardless of if they're receiving 2 days in person or the full virtual model. That also means that we're able to align all of our courses as normal to our major instructional goals or Missouri Learning Standards. And additionally, because it's all housed in our learning management system, we have the ability to flip to virtual within 24 hours should something in the community health-wise spark that, or we need to do that. We have the ability because of how we've organized and designed for either option. So we're going to take a little bit of time to go through each of those options with you just to give you some updates. So the in-person learning schedule, this is a graphic that's taken directly from our Back to SPS plan, lives currently on our website and has been communicated out. But again, wanted to remind you, what we have done here is organize our students in alpha order. So those that selected in-person as their option, right, are either attending Monday, Tuesday seated, or Thursday, Friday seated, with a fully virtual day on Wednesday. So that is the in-person schedule that currently stands. So Wednesdays are a fully virtual day for both groups with live lessons and modules provided from teachers regardless of their division. So elementary, middle, and high, while that looks a little different, it's still live instruction on Wednesday for any of those environments. So students are off on the other days. So if I'm a Monday, Tuesday seated in-person student, then on Thursday, Friday, I have at-home learning days, which are a different responsibility, and we'll talk into that a little bit more. But what we want you to know about that is that environment is much more independent and flexible than what you would see on a Wednesday, right, for those students. They still will access their online curriculum and tools, but their interaction with teachers are much more limited than on a fully virtual Wednesday. So again, this is just the schedule for in-person. We did want to bring back up to you the numbers specific to our requirements with DESE. So again, we continue to align student learning to these instructional minutes. This is the way that we ensure that teachers can be accountable for that learning and instruction and keep students on track for success regardless of if they opted for in-person or virtual. So just a reminder that this is part of the design of how we have done instruction. So I know that there has been some questions specific tonight and then in other arenas relative to that learning at home day, right? So the days that I've selected to be in person and the days that my students are being asked to do learning from home, so my off 2 days. And so here's a little more specificity around both elementary and secondary. So this slide really walks you through how those days will kind of fall out. It's important to note that these days will look and feel different than Wednesdays, which I've already said. Wednesday is a fully virtual day, right? So you have that access to that teacher. But on Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday, depending, these will look different and that experience will be different. Students will be asked to be more independent than the other 2 days, and it'll be much more asynchronous, meaning that they will access recorded lessons or activities, they'll access curricular online tools, they'll be Teachers will be engaging by posting videos, announcements, things for students to keep track through their day of what they need to be doing, but this will be much more flexible than, say, a Wednesday for these students. Secondary is obviously a little bit of a different beast than the elementary world. Again, they will be posting announcements for students and reminders about tracking them through their learning plan. But again, independent tasks, minimal adult support for our secondary students that are going to be learning from home. Again, not as synchronous due to the nature of the work. Similarly, because of the age of students and their ability to maintain a little bit more flexibility than we would ask of, say, an elementary student. There we go. So that was in-person learning days. Now we're going to shift to our students and families that have elected for a fully virtual experience. So all online, 5 days a week. Here's a sneak peek at the elementary schedule. Again, this has been sent out. It lives in the Back to SPS plan. This is a virtual only student that we're now talking about. So recommended start time for elementary is 8:30, and we are asked, and what we want you to know is that students will engage with a teacher 4.25 hours throughout the day. That will be direct teacher-led instruction. You'll note in the visual that also includes some hours of independent work time, because we know that much like a classroom, they'll engage with their teacher and then they have some independent time on task, just the same as they would if they were in a regular classroom environment. You'll also note that we've built in opportunities here for those students to have physical activity. We know they're going to do lunch. We know that they'll have some recess time that you'll elect as those kiddos are home, and all that has been really built in and outlined in that visual. Again, the secondary experience looks different, but middle and high school students will engage with the daily content that's online and really complete their assignments for the most part independently. So here's the breakdown of what I think you will want to know specific, which is about course requirements and hours. So 6 hours per week in each of their courses, with teacher support available 3 hours per course per week. So that's just a breakdown of how they will receive that teacher support. Our attendance for virtual and grading expectations are the same as in person, right? So we'll be giving layers of feedback in the virtual environment just as we would if students were seated. And teachers will be communicating regularly with parents and guardians about attendance, monitoring, if there's additional needs for support. So if a student isn't being successful, that communication chain will be actively utilized to help them stay successful in a virtual environment. We also wanted you to note that obviously we welcomed back our teaching staff, our certified teaching staff on Monday, so the 17th, and that we've already begun the process of engaging them around some learning relative to not just the Back to SPS plan or reentry plan, but just teaching in general. And so we also are trying to do that in the safest possible way, which required some adjusting to how we normally engage with our newest teachers and then all of our teachers. So we have shifted to mainly virtual delivery of content using the platform Zoom. So we welcomed 175 new teachers, whether that be brand new or new to SPS this year, and we have continue to feature just their opportunities to learn about district curriculum, the supports we provide, the resources, and then of course getting them set up around their standards. And similar to what we have always done, they continue to get that step-up support from learning specialists to help them acclimate to our district. So we started that process, as well as what we typically call Activate, which is really our curriculum institute and getting teachers reacquainted with their current curriculum. So that has shifted this year to be delivered over the course of this week. So that's happening now. We are doing it in much smaller groups where they're having access, because of Zoom, to their specific curriculum coordinators to provide them the most relevant information about their learning and what they will teach to students. The sessions have been focused not only on that curricular aspect, but also on virtual teaching best practice. What we've said this year is really all of our SPS teachers are virtual teachers this year. And so how do we equip them with new skills to be able to tackle that new learning responsibility and environment? We also know that some of our teachers have needed a little bit more support with getting their Canvas course set up and ready for both an in-person learning option that has a 3-day virtual component or a 5-day virtual. And so that has required a little bit of adjusting. We continue to remind them about expectations just around learning, and then been really informative relative to assessments and how we can identify where learning gaps are for our students as they return. And so that has been how we've kicked off and launched some prep for teacher learning thus far. And then the last little piece of update before we move into the data section is just around some of the safety and operational pieces that we've continued to discuss as we have developed that back to SPS plan. So a shift from the last time we reported is the full masking piece. So if you'll recall prior in the previous board update we provided you, we had not made that determination at that time, so that is a shift. All students and staff will be masked as they return next week. Of course, we know there will be some medical exceptions, but for the most part, we're asking all of our employees and all of our students to mask as they return to our buildings. Additionally, that Wednesday day is really going to be the day that we deep clean between our cohorts of in-person students. And we have plans for how that will work so that we can ensure that not only our classrooms are sanitized on those days and cleaned, but then our buses and other areas of our district. The other piece I'll highlight here is just related to the fact that we continue to collaborate externally across partnerships in the community for relative to our safety guidelines and what's going on with the State Department as well as our Department of Health and Senior Services. We were on a call again just today with regional partners related to what's happening closest to us and how we will respond if situations change. And so we just continue to be open to listening to what others are doing and to learn and to make adjustments as necessary related to the health of the community and how that impacts what we do in SPS. So I am going to continue through the data section, and then I promise you get a chance for questions. But I think it will be important for you to know where the data landed, what percentages of our kids are landing where, and then there will be a question section after that, okay? So the next couple of slides are data, so I'm going to give you a little bit of time to dissect, but then also train your eye to a couple of things. So this first data set is K-12 enrollment, and it's in-person versus virtual breakdowns, so what was selected using some of the same measures that we typically provide to the board. So that would be our demographic data as well as our lunch status data. So that's what you're training your eye to here, and this aligns really with our overarching focus on equity work just in general across the district for our under-resourced and underrepresented students. So what I will point out to you is obviously that 1 out of every 4 of our students opted for virtual. So that is about 24% of our current enrollment. So when you think about totals, that's something to look at. So 27% free and reduced chose a virtual option versus 20% of our full pay students choosing a virtual option. And then really some
One more time, or point to me where I say it one more time.
Yep. So the farthest column for virtual. So full pay student, 20% of our full pay students, 24% total, and 27% FRL students, the furthest column. Yep. And then there are differences in selection by race, with the largest gap being between white and black students. So you can see that is the largest gap there for district overall. So this is, again, full picture, overall district, who opted to virtual versus in-person. So the next data set is broken into grade spans, so thinking elementary, middle, and high, and highlights items that we really look at and want to be aware of related to free and reduced lunch status. So our free students and our reduced students grouped together. We actually see consistency between all grade spans. It's about 1 to 2% is the largest gap, and not much of a difference as you're looking between divisions. So fairly consistent, those opting for virtual or in person. So again, this is by lunch status. The next one has a little bit more data, so prepare yourself. A couple more bars. So again, in-person versus virtual, but now you have the demographic data across the bottom. So how did our white students select, our black students, Hispanic, and then multi-race across the bottom? Again, consistency across our grade levels and ethnicities, even in the expanded data set by demographic. So probably the data point to point out here, at high school, the number of black students is higher, a higher percent choosing in person, right? So you see other divisions at 68 and 67, and then a jump at high school at 73% opting for in person. But again, overall, very consistent. And then the last two data slides are, again, in-person versus virtual by free and reduced lunch status. But this look gives you across our community. So we've shown you totals, but this breaks it down by feeder pattern. So it was also important for us to say, okay, when we step back and look across different sections of our community, was there anything to see or note as we start to plan for instruction? So again, almost identical across feeder patterns when you're looking at free and reduced lunch status. And just because we want to show you, here's the full pay student, similar across the community scan. The only thing here would be Parkview, that full pay students opted to virtual at a higher rate than other feeder patterns. So now I'll pause. So we've covered reentry updates, things that you might have wanted to know relative to the instructional side of the house with a couple safety things thrown in, and then the data that we used as we began to plan for our students returning. Questions that I can answer? Carol or John?
Can you remind us, because I can't see it, can you remind us what other sections are coming up?
Yes.
Or if we ask a question about a section coming up?
Sure. So I'll remind you, the next section is on preparation. So that will include some staffing information, how we staffed, where they came from, that piece. And then it will also include our staff training pieces, meals, transportation, some of that. And then the final section will be about adjustments we've made. Okay. So to some activities, to programs. Okay. So those are the next two sections.
Okay.
In the spirit of transparency and for the purpose of our community members, I'd like to ask a few questions that goes back to your first couple of slides.
Okay.
So who were the people who were on your reentry work teams, and is there a list of them somewhere?
Yeah. So that was shared not by specific individual name or title, but by those departments, and then how much of those groups included, all of those groups included teachers and principals, but those departments were listed in the previous board report.
Yes. Just for transparency purposes, I'm asking these questions.
Yeah.
Also, were there any board members on any of those task force, any of those reentry teams?
There were not.
Okay. And that's all I have for right now.
Okay.
First, an observation that I'm really quite not surprised, but I'm struck by the consistency of the percentage. It's roughly a quarter, and they move a little bit one way or the other, regardless of level in school, which was the thing that surprised me most, plus feeder pattern. My question goes to the couple references to collaboration with Springfield, Greene County, and other community partners, et cetera. Can you talk a little bit about the nature of that collaboration? And then the real question I want to get at is, and I think that will stem from the answer to that question, is what are the metrics we will use to identify when it is time, if it becomes time, to make a change in whatever direction? And I don't know that there's a single number, but at least at the district level, at a school or a class level, perhaps. But how will we know it when we see it? I'm not comfortable with the notion of, and I'm not putting words into your mouth, that we'll kind of know it when we get there. I think we need to be a lot more transparent and a lot more data-driven. So what are those metrics?
So I'll defer to Dr. Jungmann on the metrics piece, but I can tell you on the collaboration piece, we are in weekly collaboration with the Springfield Greene County Health Department. So Jean Graybill, our Director of Health Services, has calls with them every Wednesday. And so that is a constant form of collaboration, but they also helped and supported the work specifically of that health and safety reentry work team that we engaged with them relative to that. So they've been at the table since the beginning, and we continue to have updates. I think some of the other regional collaboration has been something that Dr. Jungmann and Carol and I and several other executive directors have engaged in, just to continue conversations around what others are doing and how we might support each other as we engage in this kind of chaotic time. We actually just had one of those calls today, and that very question around metrics was brought up in that sector as well, but I'll let Dr. Jungmann address that piece.
Yeah, so I'll open with a quote directly from Clay Goddard, since there's a question whether he's engaged. I talk to him almost daily, and this is from KMBC from last week article. Our department and those across the state have been working with our local school systems to find the best solution. It appears to me that our greatest hope for success is the model many of our local school systems plan to employ, which includes a split cohort model with separate meeting days and a thorough cleaning day in between, while also allowing full virtual options for the students who have the opportunity. Can't ask for much clearer endorsement from Clay Goddard than that quote regarding what we've been doing as a partnership, as well as his support of that model as a
I'm pleased to hear that. My question, though, goes to what are the metrics?
So here's what we have, right? So, and this is directly from DESE and the Department of Health and Human Services. It says, while Missouri does not have statewide thresholds and criteria to dictate how COVID-19 stats should impact mitigation strategies and approaches to teaching and learning, there are several data points we should look at. So here are the ones they recommend. And this is what Clay and John Mooney and I continue to monitor and say these are the data points that we evaluated when we were on July 15th trying to decide which model we deploy, and said we believe that because of the rising cases in our community, this is why we should go to a reduced cohort model. Percent change in new cases per 100,000 over a 7 to 14 day period is one of the data points. Increases in new cases per 100,000 in the county and the school district is located over 7 to 14 data points. Increased percent positivity of tests reported in the school's attendance area, right? And that's an important part of this, is our attendance area versus county versus hospital utilization areas, because we get a lot of hospital utilization data, but that may not just be our school district, unfortunately. It's good that we serve a lot, but that's not necessarily our district data. Then that's the other things, increasing rates of hospitalization and death, so really looking at those data points. And then hospital and ICU bed capacity in the region which the school is located. And I think the important thing to note is when we closed, right, if you go back and talk to the health professionals and you talk to Clay Goddard originally around why we closed, primarily it was allowing the healthcare systems to prepare to be able to handle the disease and create a testing structure and all those things that weren't in place in March and April. That's why schools shut down. We aren't ready for full opening because we have some of these data points that are still warm in our community. I talked to Clay today and he said, the good news is we're fairly stable right now. We're not seeing a big increase. We have a couple spike days here occasionally, but we're not seeing a big increase. So I think that where we're starting is is a great place to start. And then if we can see that decline, then maybe we can hit that 5-day opportunity, 9 weeks in, after we see a few cycles of data. So those are the data points. There's not one or two specifically that they're going to point to and a specific percentage. Our state hasn't done that. No districts in Missouri have done that. That has played out in Minnesota, so we've used their guide as potentially a place to start. And we've shared that between the health department and the district to determine should we use some of the data points that Minnesota has used as their thresholds for opening and closing, moving between structures. They're yet to give us a full recommendation on these are the three and these are the percentages. And based on feedback, I'm not sure that they're going to give us those percentages, but they're going to say these are the data points, and they're pretty consistent with the ones that state has given us.
If it's okay, could I just follow up?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't want to dominate. But first, I'm not surprised that we've not gotten great guidance from the state. I'm not waiting for that. I'm much more comfortable probably working with Clay Goddard. I think we'll probably get better answers. But secondly, that goes to sort of a district-wide decision, right? That's kind of the using a chainsaw, right? We're going to make a big change. What happens at, let's say, a building level, because people don't get sick, not in the district. They get sick in X high school, Y elementary school. So what metrics will we use to make those kinds of surgical decisions?
Yep. And that's the perfect analogy. We were on the phone call just today with John Mooney and all the regional superintendents. He refers to the scalpel approach to when you're talking about closing a school or closing a classroom. And almost every time I talk to he or Clay, it will say, it depends, right? It's all about the incidents and how they happened in each one of these buildings. And putting carte blanche, numbers and percentages isn't really a great structure to do it, because it depends on what kind of infection happened, how many people were happening, or how many people were in that group. Was it a self-contained group? Because it could be 10 kids from a self-contained group, or it could be 10 kids that traveled the building, right, all day. Those are percentages would be applied differently on whether or not you chose to close that campus. So just going on a percentage, they said, is a very difficult thing to do, because it depends, right? That 2% of this population, it depends on that 2% and where they came and who they came into contact with, versus 2% of this population that traveled the whole building, right? Or were in a different class that was larger than the other class. So they are working on percentages. They haven't given us one that says, here's the number you should be functioning on. And they're looking at some recommendations around exactly what you said, class size, and then building size, right? So 10 or less in a class, might be a percentage that you look on. 10 to 25, you look at this percentage. 25 and above, you look at this percentage before you close down that class or maybe that activity, right? So let's say it's a sports team. And then those percentages, and then what would you apply to a full building, which is a much larger potential, right? So it would probably be a smaller percentage at that point, because just the number that's there. Bottom line is, there is no metric that's recommended by state or local health department that says this is the number you should function on. It depends on how those cases are in your schools and how they are spread potentially in those schools. And we will make all those decisions directly in coordination with them. So Jean Graybill sits at the table every time we have a case that comes to us with our health department, says, all right, who else did it infect? Do we need to shut down the program? Do we need to shut down the classroom? Or do we just need to quarantine these 3 kids or this staff member? It's not an easy, right, script, right, for us to follow, unfortunately. We could create a manual, right, that says percentage, percentage, percentage. But unfortunately, we might be supplying that because we'd apply a percentage rule when that rule really didn't apply to the building or the program, because it was spread in a very different way. So I know that's not easy, right? But it's the reality of how we're managing it case by case as it comes into our schools.
I don't think this will be controversial, but if we're going to err on the side of applying it one way or the other, we absolutely should err on the side of caution when it comes to making those surgeries.
Agreed completely. And that's where, I believe we've erred there with our opening and reentry plan, right? This is the cautious approach for our region and for this area of the state, considering where we know we are erring on the conservative reentry structure and the most aggressive tactics in order to protect our students and staff. And we'll continue to do that, Charles, right? We'll continue to do that, so. Thanks. Wait, questions, feedback?
I guess mine focuses around a couple things. One, accountability. with respect to masking and instructional time that's set aside on the virtual? I mean, what's the accountability on students? What's the accountability on staff? Or what you just laid, I mean, you laid out a great schedule. That's fine, but what's the accountability for that? Well, how do you account for that other than test scores come up in 9 weeks?
So are you asking on accountability as far as who's wearing their mask and when? Are you?
I had kids that couldn't keep shoes on, let alone keep a mask on. And so I'm just wondering how that, and I know that's kind of a procedural thing locally, I understand that, but it will come up.
Yep. Yeah.
And so I just was curious.
I mean, we're having conversations with staff about what is required. We're requiring that students and staff mask. And so we are going to enforce that and help our teachers be gracious and kind, but also hold people accountable because it's about safety. And so they will be having those conversations with kids at all levels about why you need to keep your mask on and how that impacts how we move about day to day in this new learning environment.
We're providing masks, aren't we?
We are, and I think Carol will get into the specificity in a minute about masking and what we have. Yeah, relative to supply. You know, we do not want to engage in power struggles with kids over something that we don't want to do that. But we also have an obligation to make sure they are aware of the consequences of electing to not mask. And I think those conversations are probably easier at a middle and secondary level because of those kiddos' ability to understand. It will be our youngest learners and how we can make sure that they know why we're doing it. But I am fully confident in our early educators and teachers' ability to make it fun somehow and get kids to comply with that safety protocol.
This question is for the benefit of a lot of families who have come to me with questions. And I know that you have addressed this before, but could you briefly kind of talk about the difference between the virtual learning that will happen this fall versus what happened in the spring?
Yeah. So what we know is what we did in the spring for SPS at home what we know is that was not necessarily aligned to what we do for our fully virtual kids normally. So that was a flip to get our kids access to education in a short window and a short amount of time. So that included some at-home learning packets. It really didn't have all of the robust pieces that we've now had time to develop and put into place, right? To quality assurance, to make sure it's all aligned to our standards. Now, I will say our team did a fantastic job in the spring in a short window. But the product that we have either for full-time virtual or for our 2-day in and our 3-day out model are much more conducive to allowing kids to walk through and pace through the learning environment. And we know it's all aligned now, that whether Sharita's in person or fully virtual, they're going to be pacing through the curriculum in a similar way.
And our teachers are better trained, right? I mean, that's one of the things that was definitely a difference, right, is that now they understand how to use it, what the expectation is. That was done in a couple days of training, right? So now we have more time to prepare, both on the content-wise and on the training-wise.
Yep. Thank you.
Great questions.
Others?
Any other questions on this segment before Dr. Holt moves forward?
Okay. Turning it over to my trusty colleague here for the next little section.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. And bear with me, I'm dealing with allergy issues tonight, so I may step away. I have water right behind me, so thank you. So, as Dr. Holt referenced, we've been studying a number of things, and it started with staffing, because in order for us to appropriately schedule our students, we needed to first wrap our arms around what will it look like from a staffing perspective. And so through a multitude of surveys of our staff members to seek clarity, we ascertained that of all of our staff, and that first grid shows you that we have 3,593 employees, of which 2,128 are certified, and the remainder are classified staff. So certified staff are our teacher population and administrators as well. The original survey results showed us that of our 3,405 responses, that 3,182 would be returning with no limitations. So as you can see, we did have 176 indicate that they had some form of limitation, and then it became the work of our human resources team to work directly with those individual employees to determine what abilities they might have, and is there remote work or virtual work that might be available for them. So as they journeyed through that process, they identified the number of instructional virtual placements that would be needed, and I would like to thank publicly the work of Nicole Lemon, Bruce Douglas, and Amy St. John, affectionately referred to as our data team. While there have been a number of other leaders surrounding them, they were the anchor to the work that we were doing as they analyzed the data. Yes.
Is it acceptable if I ask a question now, or do you prefer me to try to remember?
So we do have page numbers, and if you can write that down, that would be perfect.
Yeah, but I'll have to remember what I was thinking, too.
So that team then worked through identifying, once the teacher staffs were identified, then they worked through the scheduling of all of our students and making determinations of additional work needed. So I want to highlight also, beyond HR working with the individual employees based upon their particular need, we are recommending this evening for your consideration under the upcoming agenda item a new board policy that is with regard to leave, and it's specific to the COVID-19 impact and FMLA changes that have occurred. Also, to highlight for you in terms of us finding opportunities for staffing, the governor did waive the retiree 550-hour cap. So in the state of Missouri, members of PSRS who were teachers or members of peers are allowed to work 550 hours once they retire to continue to serve children. And that has now been waived, and that waiver is through December 31, 2020. So what that does for us is we couldn't tap on the shoulders of some of our retiree friends who are excellent teachers and who can fill any gaps that we might identify as we journey forward in dealing with staffing needs. So also, just new today, actually the State Board of Education had a meeting at noon today, and they released the great news that in order to qualify to serve as a substitute teacher, no longer will people have to have the 60 hours of college credit. They may attain an alternate route to that substitute certification, and that is by taking 20 hours of specialist training. And the training is a vast amount, including classroom management, equity, understanding all the things that substitutes need to know when they come in and work with our students. So, as we identified the scheduling changes that might be needed to accommodate our students as we entered into this Group 1 and Group 2 plan, we identified that it was very important that we maintain the integrity of the secondary schedules. And in order to provide additional supports then in the secondary area, we did identify that we need likely to hire 814 stipend roles, or ways that teachers can provide additional support. So we have a cost estimate for you here this evening of what that might require for us to hire these additional stipend instructors or adjunct faculty that would serve in that capacity. And so we would plan to use CARES funds toward that cost. Also, for elementary specials, we identified just a small number, 122, that would be needed to support education in the elementary area. Let's see. So, moving forward to talk about leader training, these listed here are sessions that we've actually already completed in training our leaders. And so we did spend significant time teaching our leaders the logistics and operations piece, and that was through our Learn, Lead, Succeed sessions that we held. And we participated in dialogue and provided additional frequently asked questions responses to any that were not answered. And they are relying upon our return to entry plan in its entirety. So we also had some training sessions on a culture of care, because we need to take care of our people. That's student and staff, but this in particular was focused on staff at this time, and just managing those expectations during the pandemic. Dr. Holt referenced a lot of the virtual training that occurred, but there also was a virtual curriculum kickstart that occurred early on. We delivered those via Zoom. We kept socially distanced and were able to do that in a fine manner. So staff training that's under development and will be provided. I'll mention that we have staff COVID-19 awareness, and so that's about disinfecting procedures. There will also be a version for students on some training, so we're not forgetting about them through this. Well, our mental health and social emotional learning supports, that is something that our counseling team, I referenced that a month ago, that they are doing significant work in that area, and they'll continue that work, but adding additional supports and resources as they can identify them. And social learning from and through an equity lens. So we have continued our equity studies and in the past year, and that will continue this year, but we will add to it that social emotional piece. Cultural consciousness in the classroom, that's racial injustice and COVID-19. So again, when we know better, we do better. When we learn more, it helps us make different decisions. And so everything that we're learning through this process is being applied to that which we may have already planned to do. We have updates from our counseling department for the Division of Social Services reporting virtual learning, and then we are definitely training our custodians to a higher level on how they should approach cleaning in all of the spaces. As Dr. Holt referenced, the supply piece of it, we have Dave Pelletier, our Director of Purchasing and Distribution, is doing a fantastic job navigating all the additional supplies that have come into our facility. We partnered with the Office of Emergency Management. There was a community-wide bid process that they deployed so that would assist us through this. So we currently have over 1 million masks. That sounds like a large number, but we have a lot of people that we're helping, and we wanted to make sure that we were providing for our kids. Later then, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education contacted us because there was a large donation of some washable masks, and so those are being distributed as well. We ordered and have in process of delivery partitions so that teachers doing one-on-one instruction have a plexiglass barrier, basically. Barrier's maybe not the best word, but a protective shield for them so that they can engage with the student and have that instructional time that's needed. We also are providing conference room spaces and classrooms with disinfectant and gloves and paper towels, whatever they need, so that they can do on-the-spot cleaning as desired, and certainly hand sanitizer throughout the buildings. From an instructional capacity, we always have our ready, set, supply process in place, and that has provided significantly for students, and we have over 55 partners in that, I believe, at this point in time. That would be our nonprofits and churches and others supporting our kids with needs. We also, as a district, determined that the best play this year was to provide student supplies for all of our kids in the elementary area. And so we are doing that. We're providing water bottles for students because we did have to tape off our hydration stations. So unless it has the bottle dispenser ability, if no mouth touching anything, all of that is closed off. And so we want to make sure that kids have the ability to hydrate during the day while they're in person. And then the furniture notation is regarding moving things around. So in some classrooms, maybe all they had were tables as opposed to individual student desks. And so we're shifting furniture around so that we're equipping each teacher with the furniture that they need in their room. So again, a lot of movement is taking place from a communication perspective, and this gets into the detail of safety protocols. We have floor signs for appropriate social distancing to remind people this is how far 6 feet is. We also have window and wall signs to continually remind each of us about the behaviors that are expected for us all to stay safe. And then floor tape. So especially in our high school areas, our principals desire to have the ability to provide directional information to the students so that they could stay on one side of the hallway or the other and keep the traffic flow working the best it can. So, excuse me. Okay, so in the area of technology access, we've celebrated here in this room, and we celebrate it today, that the work that we started in 2015 equipped us for success to be able to do what we needed to do to take care of our students. And that was through the deployment of the Ignite process, where we provided one-to-one devices for all of our students that were grades 3 through 12. We gave them Chromebooks. And so this information on technology access is, well, what have we done since then? And we had some additional needs. So we did provide nearly 3,500 Chromebooks for grades 1 and 2, and we provided iPads for pre-K and kindergarten students so that they would each have a device to learn with. Internet access is something that is very important, and not all of our kids have internet access, and we wanted to make sure that we were providing an equitable learning opportunity for each of those students. So we deployed, and when I say we, that would be our friend, Director of Technology, Bruce Douglas, and others surrounding him, 1,200 Khajiit hotspots, and also have partnered with MediaCom for 400 household internet access spots, and also 100 T-Mobile hotspots. So we're approaching this through a triage method in terms of what can we do to make sure that kids are provided for and have the ability to learn like anyone deserves. So software, we have 2 items listed here. One is Zern Elementary Math, and Zern is a hands-on instructional tool. It's a software that unites an immersion into learning math through a digital platform. And so it just kind of bridges the gap in terms of math for math learners. And then the Dropout Detective, it's a solution that identifies at-risk students. So it's a software where reporting can be pulled, and we can identify quickly any student that needs to be at the forefront of, we need some additional assistance here. So that's a great tool for our teachers to be able to utilize. And with Dropout Detective, it can provide individual student information or whole school information as well. So from a nutrition services perspective, I want to highlight that the federal waiver has ended. So when we were providing free meals district-wide in the spring, that was a wonderful opportunity for us to impart to our patrons in the community. That has come to a close, and so now we will be operating under our regular fee structure that was approved in June for charging for full price meals, and of course there's a reduced price meal as well that's 40 cents a meal, I believe. And breakfast will be served in the classroom. I should highlight, I'm referencing right now to the pre-K through 5th grade section. So for in-person meals, the breakfast will be served in the classroom, whether it's a grab and go or they actually have it delivered to their classroom. Everything would be pre-packaged and individually wrapped. We won't be sharing condiments or anything like that. So all of those touch points have been thought through, as well as how to sanitize, and teaching students and expecting them to wash their hands before they eat, wash them afterwards, educating them on social distancing, and providing the appropriate spaces for that to take place. And we will look at that in terms of lunch rotation, so potentially starting a little earlier in the day if we need to add some rotations into the process. We are counting on our building principals to work through every detail of that, and we're providing district level support to them as they need it to manage that plan. So in-person meals for grades 6 through 12, again, breakfast in the classroom. We don't want congestion. We don't want engagement with others as they walk into the building. They'll be provided their breakfast, and that's for all grades. Lunch will be in the cafeteria, but we'll be limiting the students accessing meals at one time. So again, it's the same as the elementary in-person, where we'll be adding lunch rotations. We'll keep classes together and seat them together and stay in certain areas of the cafeteria, and then release in that same fashion. We potentially will have assigned seating. This, again, is something we're developing in collaboration with the building principal. We're expanding the area, so not only just the regular area, but they'll be down the hallways, or if they have a theater area, they might be in the theater eating. So whatever we can do to capitalize on the square footage in each building, we will be doing that. And again, pre-packaged, wrapped, and not sharing condiments or any other touch points that would be something of the past. For a meal distribution plan, so again, a reminder that this will be the regular fee structure. I should definitely highlight that we mailed out to each household an application for free and reduced lunch. We know that some people have had some hard times come upon them with COVID-19, and they may now qualify. And it is an offering that is very easy to attain by filling out the application, and we have ways to handle it in the school building to where nobody knows that somebody's on free and reduced lunch. So whether you're paying full pay or otherwise. So I want parents and students to know that that's an opportunity for them, and we want them to have nourishment. So group 1, Monday and Tuesday in-person students, when they leave at the end of the day on Tuesday, they're going to carry out with them meals for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And then group 2, the same logic will apply they'll pick up, when they leave on Friday, they'll take meals that would carry them for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We also will have an opportunity for anyone who's full virtual to come in and pick up meals, and we'll also provide some evening distribution times too to accommodate parents who may need those extended hours. Transportation procedures. So this is basically the same information that I shared with you July 14th, but we do have an update in that all requests, so we did a survey first to find out about ridership desire or whether or not the parents were electing for transportation for their students. And all requests that we received through August 12th have been routed, and we've also mailed out postcards to those households, and that includes the start and stop, or the stop time rather, and the location. So important to note that as we journey forward, if people become aware, oh my goodness, I need transportation, they can still go through the process and request transportation, and we will route them so long as it doesn't impede upon the previously communicated stop times and locations. If there is a situation bad, then we'll continue to work with those families to get them routed. So I would want you to know that, I actually have that on another slide coming up here. I'll hold off on that. So we'll do the same cleaning. We will seat back to front. We're going to obviously require masks and also have sanitation process in place so that everyone is kept safe as best we can do that. So we shared with you last time, and this is a repeat slide for you. We are planning now for the best situation that we can hope for, but we know we have to, as Dr. Jung referenced during our last meeting with you, we must remain flexible, agile, adaptable to whatever new information that we have. And so in the event we are faced with a bus driver shortage, then we would need to potentially modify some of our offerings that we're providing. So I do have coming up an eligibility and access slide. So as you can see, our total eligible for transportation is 11,389, and 41.71% of our students that are eligible are electing to be provided with transportation services. Look at the breakdown between the free and reduced lunch population to the full pay. You can see free and reduced lunch is a little bit higher, nearly a 9-point spread. 46% free and reduced lunch are choosing to ride the bus. 37% of our full pay students are choosing to ride the bus. When you look at the demographic breakdown, it's pretty level in total. 42, 42, 41, 40, nearly 41 for those ethnicities listed. So I want you to know that if we compare this data to FY20, so I'm showing you that we have 1,389 students that are eligible. A year ago, our eligibility level was 10,688, and as you know, you approved that we would expand transportation services. And so we did that, and those are the people that were identified as being eligible when we first reached out for parents to make a choice. And so last year, of our 10,686, we had 7,721 riders. So that was 72% last year, as compared to our total 41.71% this year. So we definitely see a decrease in riders selecting transportation services. We're not saying that. Parents are coming up with other ways to get their students to school or to carpool or that type of thing. And I should also share with you that in FY20, we had 132 routes, bus routes, and as this has been identified through all of these students that have selected to ride, we have 105 routes. The good news is that currently we have 117 drivers ready to go. So we are, unfortunately, in the situation we're in, it has caused us to be in a better place from a day one start. Sometimes we would still be struggling with the nationwide transportation driver shortage. Okay, so it is time for questions about that section.
So that's what happens when you give me about 30 minutes to think of my question.
That's all right.
I'm going to have an introductory long sentence. Well, I'm experiencing this pandemic from a variety of different perspectives, right? I am a board member. I am an employee of a large institution in town. I am a parent of a student who's going to be participating in this, the list of perspective on. And I want to say, I am impressed and really appreciative of the depth that you all have put into this consideration. I feel a lot of confidence in it. What I wanted to say about page 26.
Yes, the
Because I was
restaffing.
listening, and I also appreciate that of the people who were brave enough to come here tonight and speak to us, I really appreciated how they were diametrically opposed to each other on some points, because that illustrates very well that there is no simple answer to what we're dealing with. One, none of us have an experience like this that we can look to say, what did we do last time? Because that just doesn't exist. And two, there are respectable, thoughtful, smart people who completely don't agree with each other on this point. So we have got to acknowledge that this is complicated, and they're not any of them necessarily right or wrong. So I appreciate that. What I appreciated about page 26, and I do have a clarification here once I get off my soapbox. I appreciated that you surveyed our staff and our faculty, because I did try to respond to a lot of the letters we received, but at some point I had to stop because I had to work a little. So I didn't get them all, but I responded to a lot of those letters. And I really appreciate you having asked their opinion, because it matters. What I wanted to know, because one of our speakers tonight worried that if they identified themselves, they were worried. Did we do that anonymously, or did they tell us who they were when they were filling out those surveys?
So the word survey is a mer.
Okay.
We truly needed to get to the employee level, because we needed to have true clarity of which teachers were going to be able to come in and serve their students. And that then provided us the data we needed for scheduling purposes. So we received the information in what I would say to you is a very holistic, anonymous perspective in terms of, okay, how many teachers do we have available for this grade level or that particular certification? And then the data took a different path for the human resources team to then individually be engaging with the employees for their particular needs, because protections for them. And so it's been the right process. It was a necessary process. And you know, in the beginning, again, when people perceived that it might have been a survey that was optional, we had to continue to follow up until we got responses from everyone as best. We still fell short of just a few, but
Not a lot. It was a pretty
no,
impressive number.
it was very thorough. Thank you.
And on that same slide, the last bullet, state DOE approved alternate route to obtain substitute certification. You said 20-hour training
Yes.
for subs, and I assume they'll have to have some kind of criteria.
Well, yes, and actually, they must have a high school diploma for starters. But then they will be trained, basically, is the plan.
No college?
They would not have to have college.
It's just 20 hours of college, right?
This is 20 hours of
No.
training.
It's a, yeah, so it's a 20-hour training.
But just high school degree,
20
no
hours of
college,
training.
but a 20-hour training, and who would be providing that 20-hour training?
Do you know?
Provider, right? It has to be
Yes.
an approved provider, so so there is one already out there, and we've known that this is likely coming. We've been in contact with our
Right.
provider to talk about what does that training need to look like. We've been on this conversation, to be honest, for 6 months. We've had a sub-issue in this state for quite some time, and it's just been exacerbated by a pandemic. So this is about providing access to another set of individuals who may have great responsibilities, experience working with kids. They just don't have 60 hours of college credit. And we all know that that college credit might be in education, but it might have nothing to do with education, but it automatically qualifies them to be a substitute. So we went the path of this alternative is around training to be a substitute. It'll be a baseline training, and then we can choose whether or not we continue to employ those. This does give us access to another set of subs that might not have been available.
We don't do the training.
No.
The training will likely be provided by, I believe, our third-party provider.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is this a temporary kind of thing?
I don't know if they-
in response to COVID, Or
Yeah.
will this go back to having different sets of criteria after
I
pandemic?
don't know what the state board's authorization was, if it had they had talked at one time about it having a sunset provision, but if this is a state board approved thing, it just happened today.
Happened
I don't know if it's
today.
got a sunset. I don't know if it has a sunset, but we can follow up. Yep.
That was exactly going to be my question. I would hope so,
Yeah.
I think, because these are exigent circumstances.
And that's what we had talked about previously is, let us try this, right? See if that gets us access to another set of subs that will be, and then we can always choose which subs we use. That's always within the purview of the district or the third-party provider, so.
So I would like to clarify, it's high school diploma or equivalent, which we've had because not everybody takes the same path in their educational advancement. The training includes topics such as professionalism, honoring diversity, engaging students, foundational classroom management techniques, basic instructional strategies, supporting students with special needs, and working with at-risk youth. So it's a comprehensive training process that would equip them to be a substitute.
Would these substitutes be a part of this stipend group of persons that we are looking for?
You know, we require certifications for our regular teachers, and certifications are also a must in terms of providing adjunct.
So, no, they might sub in one of those environments potentially, but they would not be the teacher of
For
record.
regular work.
And while we're down the sub
Yes.
rabbit hole for just a minute, when we think of substitute teachers, maybe a year ago, we're envisioning a completely different experience of subbing. So how are you just subbing substitutes this year, given the two types of entry plans?
Anytime we have students who need an appropriately authorized adult to care for them,
Okay.
that would be a substitute. But it's not our path that we would have regular substitutes, just hire people to be there with the students. We are focused on placing the appropriately certificated teacher
And we'll
with our
have
kids.
virtual subs, right?
Right.
For times when we have extended absences in virtual environments, because that teacher may not be able to serve, right? So we will have the ones that serve in a virtual structure as well as in-person structure.
My hope would be that once we navigate through this pandemic, and it will end, in some ways, the ideal strikes me as the current certification for substitute plus the 20 hours.
Right.
That seems to me to raise the bar. I mean, we're in a point now where it's entirely likely there will be more demand for substitutes, and so we have to accommodate. And that 20 hours seems like a pretty reasonable chunk of information that they all have to have.
We agree, that's something that we should add to every that should have been part of the original. I don't know if the 60 hours automatically qualifies you or not, if it has nothing to do with education in general. It's the bar that our state has set, and every state has a different bar, so this just adjusting, so.
I do think at least waiving temporarily the 550, that's a really smart
That's
thing.
really helpful
That's
tool
smart.
also. It is.
Thanks.
And one last thing, on slide 29, I think it's amazing that we are providing supply kits for all our students. Not something that's gotten much attention, but it's huge, and it means a lot, especially for families with 3 and 4 and 5
Sure.
children. Not have to worry about getting school supplies.
Absolutely.
Any other question? I have just a couple questions, and it just struck me that talking about all the prepackaged foods and various levels, would you anticipate a budget adjustment? Because I'm thinking buffet lines are typically cheaper, so to make that kind of switch.
We will be analyzing all of our data as we move forward. You know, not only do we have our typical A-line food tray, but then there are those other options that students have been accustomed to being able to purchase, and there will definitely be to the budget. Those at this point in time are not known.
Okay. And then you mentioned mailing out about the free and reduced lunch rate.
Yes.
You mentioned mailing, and when I think mailing, I think snail mail.
It was snail mail.
It was, it came in the mail.
So I'm just, and I'm also thinking, and I'm also thinking, I mean, I've seen it on our website.
It is on our website. I should have mentioned that.
Social media, I mean, I've seen it
Yes.
picked out several different ways.
Definitely on our website.
Asking that, I guess my question is you know, will our principals or our teachers, I'm thinking they know firsthand, parents got the information, you know,
Right.
people can move, blah, blah, blah. So I'm assuming there will be additional strategies to follow up to make sure we have, that everyone who needs to can.
Right, and we actually have a collaborative team, a cross-functional team that includes instructional leaders and operational leaders who had met this past spring to identify ways to ensure that we're capturing all of the students, to ensure that they're having the nutritional needs met each day. And so in my conversation with Dr. Shaw, who was one of the leads of that process, I said we need plan FY21 COVID, need our regular plan for the year following. So we will definitely be revisiting that to see how can we support our families and the kids.
This case is everyone that gets one, fill it out and turn it. It doesn't hurt anything to fill it out and turn it in, and then we can qualify.
It's really easy to fill out.
Yeah. Driver shortage, 35.
Right.
Not that that matters, but in case anyone cares, who is on 35. And then you mentioned one of your closing comments was where we're at to start this year versus last year. But this is going to be not a very great question. Do we have driver substitutes?
We do.
I mean, do we have even if we don't? Okay, so can you just speak to that? 'Cause
Right.
I'm not familiar with that.
So every year.
Oh, I'm one of them, thank you.
Can I tell her now it's us?
You might want to get your CDL training. There's a vast amount of training that goes bus driver. Actually, our Director of Transportation, Jonathan Sheldon, every year works to recruit people to be regular full-time bus drivers, or for some people, they may be more interested in a substitute role where they just fill in as needed. So as we start the year, based on our current staffing levels, we anticipate that we have 12 people or so that would be available for substitute routes. And I will also mention that a number of people who work in the transportation dispatch office also have licensure and are able to drive, and so they fill in as our first substitutes as well.
Okay, and is there a local, for instance, hire an agency that helps with subs, but is there a local sub?
There isn't, and
Okay.
I would say that anyone in any district in the entire state would say no, and so it's left to the individual districts to recruit and work to retain, and also to train, and we have a significant process that our bus driver employees will go through.
Thank you. Any other questions before we move on?
Just thank you.
Yes, so pass that on.
Please.
A lot of people working really hard.
It's obvious.
Okay, so I will stay here for a few more slides. My colleague and friend, Nicole Holt, to come back with me. So I'm just highlighting for you that we have also taken a look at our co-curricular and extracurricular activities to ascertain what is the best way for these students to engage. And so what I have listed for you here Allison Pilley, our Director of Learning Support, is highly engaged in all things curriculum, and she provided me with these nuggets of truth that the marching bands would not have competitions, but they will participate in football games when we're able to have football games. And rehearsals for those band and orchestra and also choir, they will be in reduced groups, so they'll rehearse in smaller groups of 25 or less. Of course, masking will be mandated. And then for speech and debate, it'll be a combination depending on the grade level. So high school, they'll have virtual competitions, but in person, social distancing, so it'll be both. But for middle level, they'll have their club meetings, and then they'll use social distancing and masking and do virtual competitions. Then another example for you on extracurricular, so you're very familiar with our Club Encore program that provides additional supports for kids beyond the regular school day. So for those students who qualify, they'll still have that club on their in-person learning days, and it will be for both math and reading, whichever they qualify for. And then another example listed is Science Olympiad and math competitions. Those will be held virtually. So our go-to is, can we do this in a virtual way and deliver with integrity? And so each opportunity is being assessed. So for athletics, I have a number of slides here. I want you to know that Josh Scott, our Director of Athletics, and his assistant Marty have worked collaboratively all summer and have stayed in tune with the Missouri State High School Activities Association and the changes that they brought forward. So significant collaboration, not only through MISHA, but with our Greene County Health Department to ensure that we're following all the right best practices for how we can return to play and continue to do so. And utilize the recommendations of MISHA in this process for our secondary level students, and they've provided trainings for our building leaders. So just ensuring that everyone knows what is the right application for practice and that type of thing, and answering any of our parent questions as well. So this slide shows you some of the adjustments to programming that have taken place in the area of athletics, and we did have our traditional fall sports start on August 10, and so we've continued to monitor and adjust as is necessary. Again, MISHA has provided our guiding light, how we would address student needs, and the screening piece of it, providing all the right safeguards for how we're going to transport kids and reducing transportation. We've canceled MISHA rather, all over overnight travel is canceled for the fall. So that was a decision that was made early. Limiting our contest opponents. So the Kansas City and St. Louis areas, Boot Hill and Columbia, those are all canceled. We're sticking with games with our Southwest Missouri friends and conference schools. So that is one approach. The jamborees with 3 and 4 teams have been canceled, and we will have seating limitations per the health lines that have been provided to ensure that we're providing social distancing. We'll also be altering game locations as needed to accommodate our spectators. So on the current rules for MISHA, so again, it's been a journey. So early in the spring, MISHA came out with a rule that it went strictly virtual, then they did not have the ability to compete. And if you were in person, partially or full, that you would. They've removed that restriction now in August to state that virtual instruction students do qualify to participate so long as all the right healths are being followed. Preseason jamborees, we reduced those from the 3-team mandated structure to allow for 2-team scrimmages. And then if schools do not meet that minimum requirement of games, they would have to, the requirements of games played, they have to go for the postseason play. So they are also recommending an option for an alternative season if there's an impact of COVID to the regular fall and spring sports, that they would have that opportunity. Whoops. I thought I had more, and I don't on that. Have another one, and I'm kind of out of order on it, but I'll go ahead and cover this next slide. It's funny how you go through this slide deck 100 times, and it's once you're presenting it, you realize, oh, wish that had been flipped. I'll pause and comment about the employee leave policy right here. Again, we'll talk about it more during the agenda item, but this is a new policy and it's effective back to April 1st, 2020 through December 31, 2020, and that aligns with the governor's waiver and other orders. So it does mirror the federal emergency paid leave information, and that is to provide 10 days of emergency pandemic-related needs. And the FMLA provisions are extended for emergency child care, and that's for up to 12 weeks at 2/3 pay. So this is also within this policy. We have also added to it a new quarantine leave. So there would be 10 days of paid leave for an employee of Springfield if they are quarantined due to an exposure at school where they're working, or when their school-age child in SPS has been exposed, and therefore as a parent then they are quarantining with their students. So that is item number 3 there. And then authorized our employees to draw upon advance leave options. So maybe they had depleted all the leave in their bank and we allowed them to draw on future leave accruals. We are authorizing through this policy recommendation up to 10 days of advance leave for our employees as well. I referenced before the governor lifting the 550-hour rule for retirees. This policy would also extend health insurance benefits to those retirees who work more than 20 hours per week in SPS. So now you'll see my out-of-order athletics, and now I'm jumping back to fees. So in conjunction with all that we know about athletics and activities, we are bringing forward as another agenda item a recommendation that we would temporarily suspend our activity fees, and that's gate entry fees. We don't know what tomorrow holds, and we're doing the best with what we know today, and we'll continue to adjust to take care of kids and take care of the staff serving them. But we believe that it would be prudent that we not set a fee that later would need to be refunded, or we would get into some of those complexities. So the listing is for you here. Also, student participation fee that does include gate coverage for athletes who participate in SPS sports, and that's a $50 fee. And then we have some modified plans, and when I say we, again, I'm referring to our fantastic leadership in the athletics department, and that would be for varsity football games. Otherwise, sports would be a $2 admission. So again, working on social distancing could mean limiting numbers of people who are able to attend, but ensuring that we're following all the right processes to keep people safe. Okay, so we will continue to provide wraparound services with our partners. We have Spark, YMCA, and Boys and Girls Club in our buildings, and they will be offering those services on Monday and Tuesday, and then on Thursday and Friday. They will also be providing certain services on Wednesday in limited spaces in the buildings in which they operate, because our custodial teams will come in and do a deep clean of all of the classrooms. So they don't use our classrooms, it's the common areas, so then those spaces will be thoroughly cleaned in after hours once those employees for Boys and Girls or YMCA or Spark depart. So that, I believe, wraps up my section. I'll be back to help answer any questions you may have, but now I'll turn it back over to Nicole Holt. Excuse me.
So just a couple more slides in this section, and then you will have the chance for.
Look at this one. That's adorable. Can everybody enjoy that for a moment?
So this section will talk specific to some of our other instructional programming. So what we know is that we are in a situation where we are not going to make everyone happy, but what I want to reiterate from the next section is listening. So we hear feedback, we make shifts and accommodations, and we've been doing that along this whole process, but here are some that I think that are relative that the team thought you would maybe want updates relative to programming. So the first piece is in-person learning days. So a need that came up almost immediately as we began to ask families to select options for learning for this year was what about a circumstance where I am opting to in-person learning, but based on childcare, based on reoccurring medical circumstances that might be out of my control, or I need to swap those days, and I still want to be in person. I value that option, but this is a real restriction for me as a parent. And so we sought more information from those people in particular about that request, and we're happy to report that we were able to honor almost all of the 396 requests, if not all of them, to swap those days. So again, this might be, I was assigned a Monday, Tuesday, but Thursday, Friday really works better with our schedule, and so we had a process and breakdown for who was most impacted by those switches and swaps. So what I'll tell you is that window has closed, but we were, and that's just to ensure that we can get kiddos scheduled for the first day of school, and that if there were changes to transportation, we had some time to try and get them what they needed. But we know that this is going to be an ongoing conversation, and so we have processes in place for how, if another emergent need comes up, parents can still make that request at the site level and they'll be pushed through a process. So we do, this is, I think, a highlight and something to share, that we are continuing to listen to those modifications to support our families. So other modifications that I want to note are relative to programming. So we did also make a shift to offer 4-day in-person learning supports for some of our students that require our most intensive due to a substantial disability. And so these are some of what we call our district programs, and you can see how many of our families impacted by these substantial disabilities have opted into a 4-day option. So they would still follow the Monday, Tuesday with the Wednesday day off in the middle, but we are going to allow them the opportunity to be at our sites 4 days in person. So you can see the number of students and then what percentage that was of that total group of students. So I'll let you take a minute to look at that. So again, overly positive shift here to accommodate some of our students that just require more intensive supports. So another program opportunity shift is happening currently. This is happening right now, actually, for early childhood. So we have a 4-day in-person learning option to support some of our earlier learners based on what we know about how they progress and learn. And so currently we've got about 430 students enrolled, and by adjusting our cap size of how many students will report on any of those days, we are going to offer a 4-day option to families. So again, just reminding you that those offerings will occur at our 3 early childhood centers, one opening this fall at the Ada Fulbright Center, the other 2 listed there, and then we also serve students in our Wonder Years program at 9 of our elementary sites. So we have those families to offer them that option. It actually started today, and we'll be working through that process to see what we can do to shift and help enrollment of those youngest learners. So just a couple other programs to note that we wanted you to be aware of that may have had a modification, our in-person days or our virtual days. So our Health Sciences Academy, that programming currently is being suspended through this first semester. So students that have previously accessed that program will not be currently in the model we have. 2 gifted education programming items to note to our WINGS program, so that will be offered virtual only. We won't have a seated option, in-person option for that. However, our Scholars, which is, as you know, the 6-8 program for our students, for qualifying gifted students, will be available virtual or in person, as it has been at Central. Middle College will be available, basis, and Career Center will be similar. The 5-day note there for Career Center is to let you know that if our Career Center students have opted for in-person either Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday, they will still be available to access their VOTEC classes at OTC on those other days, even if it's not on their seated day. And then Springfield Option Site will be virtual, but we are also, again, giving them the option for 4 days of in-person. So I'll invite Carol to come back up. We'll mask and then questions related to that final section on adjusting or to the other items that Carol provided some information on.
I do have a question. I'll renew the same question I asked about metrics for athletics. We've already seen some things we would prefer not to have seen.
Right.
We have a team in the wake of the NCAA, et cetera, et cetera. I think we need to be really, really mindful of when we decide whatever we decide. I understand we're following Misha's guidance, and Misha was one of the last organizations standing in the spring. So, encourage us to think very carefully. And I say this as someone who absolutely wants to see sports, but not at any price. Not that anybody in here does, but I think the metrics are going to be really important, and they will be really urgent because they're coming at us quick since we started practice on August 10th. So we've got some experience.
And I want to add that the CDC does name sports activities as high risk versus other kinds of activities.
Yeah, we know this is one of the most difficult places for us to try to function, and each one of these cases is our health director with the health department trying to determine, is this a program closure, is this a try to do activities, and we don't have all the answers, and to your data points, it's exactly the same as before. Is they're really working on some percentages to try to apply, but every time they try to come up with a percentage, then there is a, well, what if this, right? What if this scenario? Because it really depends on how the exposure happens. But programs will be suspended, right? I mean, there will be games missed. We're hopeful that we can play some in a very safe way, right? So the kids can participate in activities, and we're giving it our best shot at this point in a safe and appropriate way. But we know that there are real realities when it comes to activities that make it really tougher. Thanks for the feedback.
Any questions, feedback on this side?
Thanks for all the depth for that. That was really helpful.
I would make a comment that on the substitute teacher, it does have a sunset clause.
It does.
It does.
Thank you, Jerry.
Scrolling back through, I'm sorry. Any other questions, feedback? Before I ask a couple questions. On the last part, Dr. Holt, that you were sharing in terms of responding to the feedback, and we're all over using the word pivot. And nimble. She'd like us to use nimble.
That's the one I like.
But I appreciate the fact that you're listening, making adaptations, and so, for instance, on the requesting changes for the days, and and even looking at families with multiple last names. And all of those changes, I think, are very responsive to meeting the needs of families. And I think my question is on special education slide 49 and early childhood. How did or how do families know that these are now available?
Special education, that process was communicated directly. They called all eligible families in these bands of district programming and informed them of their option to shift to 4 days. And so you can see of the number, I have the total numbers of them opted, which was 65% of that group of students.
Okay.
So we still have some that said, no, I'm not going to come back to a 4-day option. Virtual is better for me because my child might be more medically fragile because of whatever other circumstances. So they were still given the option to, they didn't have to say yes to 4 days, still becoming 2 days or a virtual. But it was about giving them the availability to receive services 4 days.
And so what kind of feedback did you hear from parents or guardians once this was available?
I mean, they're overwhelming. It's been overwhelmingly positive.
Okay.
Especially for students that fall.
The good thing is in these environments, these are typically very small case classrooms, right? So we believe we can still socially distance appropriately. We can still follow the precautions as necessary to protect staff and students, but traditionally the IEPs of these, and this is a federal law that takes us to a certain set of students, require a lot of extra minutes and supports for many students in these programs. So this is going to give us a chance to more effectively meet those, I think, so.
And on our early childhood piece, at end of day today, we contacted about 270 families. 89% are choosing the 4-day so far.
And is it only for certain kids or for any of the kids who are at Fulbright, Campbell, or Shady Lane?
It is, so they are calling all of our 430 that are currently enrolled to say, again, similar to the SPED process, to say, would you like to? And families have the option to say, nope, I'll stay 2-day, I'll stay 4 days. So right now, almost 89% are saying, yep, we'll take that 4-day option. As you know, for these families, it would be about childcare, and when I can only have childcare for my 4-year-old 2 days a week, then it becomes very difficult when I could go to a private provider. But this was a natural listen to feedback. Can we make it work? Can we adjust class sizes, and can we still get kids access to this program?
I heard lots of parents say the exact same thing, so thank you.
Yeah.
And the reality is, the only way that we can do this, right, is because we can control class size on this, because we can cap enrollment. Can't cap enrollment in kindergarten or 3rd grade or 5th grade. Anybody that's eligible is eligible, but early childhood is something that we do have that we don't want to cap, but in order to make sure that we most effectively serve those that sign up, we are able to cap that so we can socially distance appropriately and get this number up and better served.
And I think it's the location that helps a lot with
right.
our ability to do
That's
this
right.
also.
That's right.
But if something's convenient.
I did have a couple of questions. So on the, I think this might be you, when we're talking about the HR stuff for teachers, and you said that parents who had exposures and needed to quarantine, or if they had kids within the district who needed to quarantine, they could have that leave, that paid leave. What about parents, teachers who have kids who are in Republic or Nixa or Willard, and their kids, does it also apply for them, or do the kids have to be in Springfield?
This is focused on Springfield Public School.
If there's a teacher in Springfield whose children don't go to Springfield Public Schools.
So the leave would be, the quarantine leave would be for the employee if they had an employment-related exposure, but it would be for relatives, their children, if their school-age child is in Springfield.
As currently drafted, it's for if your exposures that would happen in our system.
Our system.
Either our staff or our students, that would impact our employees.
The next question has to do with the sports fee suspension. Is there a significant impact to having that suspension of those fees?
So I can easily reference Gate approaches $500,000 a year, but with that revenue comes associated costs. And so to know how this would play out from a net perspective would be something that we'll monitor. At this point in time, we wouldn't
We
have.
still
the
collect
total
some, but not near as much.
Right.
And my last screenings, and how I think it gives us a false sense of security, knowing that screenings aren't necessarily very valid at this point. You can be asymptomatic and still be spreading the virus. So this idea that we're going to be screening people and that's going to prevent it from spreading, I think gives us a false sense of security.
That's why our Greene County Health friends remind us, keep wearing these.
Okay, any other questions for Carol or Nicole at this point? Okay, hearing none, thank you, ladies, for your very thorough overview. Thank you. I'll take a pulse with the board. Oops, sorry. Always go with majority here, so.
Majority can rule, but I'm going to step out.
You do it anyway.
We have a transition here to board policy. So, do you want to pull up the?
Are we breaking?
So we are breaking?
I'd be good with that, but I can be back in.
Okay, yeah. We
taking a break?
Take 5.
We can take a 5-minute break.
Yep, take 5.
Together, back together, and keep moving.
I'm here, ma'am. Good plan.
We have
Oh,
one.
I just really don't want to sit down again.
We're waiting on Denise.
Yeah, she'll be just getting a little snack. She'll be right here.
I am glad to hear that debate is moving to a virtual environment.
what the topic
That
will
would
be.
be
I wonder
really
what the topic
unpleasant.
will be this year. Can you
I hope
imagine
they
what
can
the
come up
topic
with
might be?
something. Well, don't make them talk about it more.
You know what it's going to be about.
I hope not.
And then went to jury to start. Marching band.
We are going to move on to our next agenda item, which is board policy, agenda item 8. And that is regarding our policy adoptions and revisions. Is there anyone presenting? Dr. Jungman is going to be presenting on these items.
These are for-year, they've been posted for your review. We've answered any questions that came our way. We really, I think Carol dove into the policy that is not MSBA. Everything else is primarily an MSBA review. And is for your recommendation tonight. The one that's personal to SBS is the leave policy, and MSBA has also reviewed that because we always allow legal counsel to give us feedback to make sure it aligns to Missouri statute and federal law. So these recommendations are either 3 of them. We have no real further comment unless you have.
Okay, all right. We've all had the chance to review these, and I will go ahead and, do you have a question?
I do.
Okay.
As regards, let's see, it is, I wrote the number down here. The quarantine leave policy, I think, is spot on, and I understand that it's limited to the kids who are in SPS as well as faculty and staff who've done everything that they need to do. But de facto, that's limited to one quarantine experience. Because if it's 10 days up and on either side, you have a 14-day quarantine. And I'm not sure that we ought to limit it to 10 days. If, in fact, they are put into quarantine because of work-related activities. So I'm not sure if this is a matter for a friendly amendment or what other process, but I would prefer to one iteration of up to 10 days if, in fact, they are put into quarantine because of work we're asking them, admittedly paying them, but asking them to do.
Yeah, and we had that same administrative discussion and landed on start with this, and then if we see that we can come back and ask for amendment of this to go longer. In general, we see actually very few quarantine leaves being necessary because we'll try to put people in remote work first, right? So if you're quarantined because of an exposure at school, can we move you to a virtual teaching assignment? Can we move you into some other position that allows you, which is what we do at this point, so you do not have to use a leave opportunity. Also helps with continuity of learning, especially for teachers. So we don't expect it to be used extensively because of our work to get people into remote work. There is the chance, you're 100% accurate, that we could have multiple quarantine policy that really is only the first semester. But if we get 90 days in and say, hey, we're having this hit us, we could obviously come back and amend for multiple quarantine leaves. We could change it today also. That's up to the board. We just thought this was a good place to start, is to say that we will protect you in the times when quarantine is created by a work-related exposure, which is beyond, I think, what most employers have done. So
My own preference
Certainly up to
would be to change it now to
Certainly
reflect just
to
as
the
you
board.
described it.
Yep.
That any time a quarantine is unavoidable because of work-related activity, get the emergency quarantine leave that they need, right? And I mean, not guarantee 14 days each time. It may not be required.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the hard part of us trying to figure out is how many days each time.
I know
That's why we-
everybody has the best of intentions.
Yeah.
I'd want to avoid
And
that.
that's why we went with, as simple as possible, that 10-day cap on that quarantine, but we certainly can expand if we wanted to say 20. I mean, we can easily just buy a number, right?
Does it
Say-
have to be a number, or can you just say quarantine leave?
Yeah, you could say any time a quarantine is created, basically, right? I would really need Penny to work on the wording of that to make sure that it doesn't open up
Right.
into any other provisions or issues that would require a change. I don't know that I can do that at the board table that quickly,
Right.
right? So if you want to work on a wording modification that if you want an expansion for the board to consider for any, that's why I would recommend it, because I want MSBA to review the language if it's going to any quarantine before we just...
Work-related.
Yeah, any work-related, right. If you want us to consider that, then we can certainly do that with another modification to the policy after MSBA looks at language, so.
Okay, any other thoughts or questions?
We don't meet again until September. It's just me. I would be comfortable approving this because from the start of school until September 8th, there could not possibly be a second quarantine. But I would respectfully request that you come back with a potential revision that addresses the concern.
We can certainly bring a drafted policy for board to send out to the board that is willing to go beyond the 10 days. Tonight gets us protection, right, for the start of school.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Good questions, and I will read the recommended action, and we can see if we are ready to take a vote on this. The recommended action is that the board adopt.
So moved.
Jill, would somebody like to second it?
I'll second.
At this point, is there any discussion about the vote for tonight? Okay, hearing none, we are ready to vote. Motion passes. Moving on to our next agenda item, new business. The first agenda item is school bus purchase, and that brings Carol Embry back to the podium.
And I skip the rest of the
That's
agenda
right, you
items.
might be up here for
Yes.
next year, that's right.
Okay, so this first item is for school bus purchases, and the recommendation includes 9 Type C 77 passenger buses and 2 Type A 28 passenger buses. Those are many through our capital project application. The total recommendation is to award to Midwest Transit Equipment the final bid totaling $1,099,908. This has been our routine the past few years. We want to make sure that we don't allow our fleet to age out on replacing our buses to keep them as appropriate vehicles for transporting students. For your context, this will cause our fleet, with all the transactions required, to remain at approximately 156 buses. So keep in mind, normally we run 100 athletic activities and other student-focused activities and substitute situations. So we do have a grant that was applied for by our Director of Transportation Services, Jonathan Sheldon, and it's a Volkswagen Trust School Program grant. And through that, we reach $105,000, actually $35,000 per grant for our use, and that's factored into the total. So, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Any questions for Carol at this time? Okay, all right. Hearing none, I'll go ahead and read the recommended action, is that the board approve the bid to Midwest Transit Equipment as presented. Do I have someone who would like to make that motion?
So moved.
Charles, is there a second?
Second.
Sharita with a second. Any? Hearing none, we can now vote. Motion passes. Moving on to our next agenda item, Chromebook purchase.
Our Director of Instructional Technology has provided this recommendation for your consideration. I referenced during the presentation that we were securing devices for our students, and this would be the $3,450 to be utilized by first and second grade students. The total is $825 funds. For us, the lowest responsible bidder is Riverside Technology, Inc.
Any questions for Carol at this point? Okay, I'll read the recommended action. That the board approve the Chromebook purchase as presented.
So moved.
Denise Thank you. Any discussion on the current item? Hearing and seeing none, we can now vote.
I love,
It's a first and a second, the same thing.
I'm voting twice.
Yes, so this is the same listing that was provided for you in the slide deck for the Return to Learn. And again, this is relative to suspending and modifying fees due to an uncertainty of how our athletics programming will play out this year. And the activities are basically gate entry fees for students and adults, and then also recommending the suspension of the student participation card, which does also cover gate pricing, and then modifying the athletic gate admission price to $2 for all sports, and Mr. Josh has a comprehensive plan developed for how we would deploy a voucher system to ensure we are providing social distancing. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Otherwise, these fees were what you approved during the June regular board meeting for this fiscal year.
School activity fees that are not on here.
At this point in time, I did check with Allison Pilley with regard to some of those other fees, and there is no recommendation that those be modified.
Okay.
In some situations, our costs are actually going up, being able to share supplies, that type of thing, and so this is the recommendation at this point. If we identify something further, we'll bring it at a subsequent board meeting.
Okay, thank you. Before we move forward?
And you did say it's for the whole year.
Yes, for the whole year.
Whole year.
Plan.
Okay, great. Recommend modification of fees and taxes as presented. Somebody like to make that motion? Charles, thank you. Is there a second?
Second?
Jill, with a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we will now vote. Motion passes. Moving forward to our next agenda item, which is unfinished business, the property tax rates. We have already had a presentation on that tonight.
Yes,
so
and
I
the
will
tax
move
rate
forward with the board approved 2020-2021 tax rate as presented for compliance with statute in setting the levy by September 1. Someone like to make that motion?
I will.
Denise? Somebody like to second that?
Exuberantly so.
Okay, Charles. Any discussion on this?
Not being exuberant.
Okay, hearing none, we can now vote. Item, which is bond project updates and actions. Carol, I know you have several things to present to us.
I do. So first, I have for you, I'm sorry, I jumped the gun on that. We do have change orders to go through first. That's the next one, isn't it? So presented for your consideration relative to Fulbright, Sunshine, and Hillcrest. And Dr. Shaw has listed out the specifics with regard to each of the requests. In total, they are $146,951, and in each instance, they are covered by available project contingency. So you each have those funds in our available contingency budget.
Any questions for Carol before we move forward? Okay, the recommended action is that the board approve the change orders and agreements as presented. Would somebody like to make that motion?
So moved.
Jill, was there a second? Second. Denise will second that. Hearing none, we're ready to vote. Motion passes. Moving forward to architectural services.
Okay, so last minute today, I did add this visual. I've actually included this visual in the slide deck for the bond project report this evening, but I thought it would be appropriate that I cover it now relative to the recommended action for architectural services. There is a duplicate, basically, or replicating that which you were provided at the July 30 special board meeting, where you approved some construction bids. And it shows you basically available funds. And I'll highlight for you that basically, at the end of the run, these are all contingency projects. Overall, we have an uncommitted amount of $12.06 million. With the Jarrett project, we won't have that construction bid until September 2020. Then for Hillcrest, we're right now at $1.437 million, but keep in mind that's a construction manager at risk, and that is certainly available for us. Williams Elementary, we're showing $147,500, so these are represented in millions. Boyd Elementary, just under $1 million, $984,000 there. Sunshine, .288 of $1 million, and Fulbright, $1.3 million. So overall, we have available, after these commitments are fulfilled, nearly $21 million to work with, and that is super celebratory. We've been able to navigate these projects, have had some great bids come through. Exciting. I've highlighted for you also, as a reminder, it was October 16th, 2018, that our Community Task Force for Facilities co-chairs, Mr. David Hall and Ms. Bridget Dirks, presented the recommendation to the Board of Education for consideration in moving forward with what ultimately became the 2019. In that report, if you read that again, they did identify next in line projects, and the next in line projects for the Community Task Force was Pipkin Middle School and York Elementary. And we all know that we can't approach Pipkin Middle School until we have Jarrett vacated, meaning after the Jarrett new middle school, and that's projected for August 2022. And so the planning forward would be, let's move on with York Elementary. And so this evening we have recommendations for you for both architect services and construction manager at risk. So, wanted to give you that context before we, the architect services have been negotiated with Paragon SAP, that team of architects for the new construction of York Elementary, as part of the April 2019 bond proposal. You can see the breakout structure of the fees for schematic design, design development, construction documents. New construction projects, there's 6% of total hard cost, construction costs, so the estimated fees is $936,611, and this would be funded by the 2019 bond. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions for Carol at this point? Approve the fee commitments for the architectural services as presented. Would somebody like to make that motion?
So moved.
Rita, would somebody like to second that?
Second.
Charles, take a second. Any discussion on this topic? Okay, then we're ready to vote. Motion passes. Moving forward to intent to use construction manager at risk.
Yes.
Carol.
So this is a construction method opportunity that is necessary, and it's something that other industries, private sector, has enjoyed for some time. So we first brought to you the idea of construction manager at risk at the May 2019 board meeting, and some of the highlights that were provided for you at that time, including the benefit is that we have a higher level of control on costs, bottom line, and that's played out over and over for us to be beneficial. What happens is, if you think of the triangle of owner, architect, and construction manager, those three come to the table all at one time, as opposed to a hard bid process, and they're working with the owner in isolation of the reality of the people with boots on the ground performing construction. And so in this manner, you have a myriad of levels of expertise collaborating together. So part of the statute, though, that supports our ability to do this requires that we provide you with no vote, simply meeting that statutory obligation, which is statute 67.5060, and we are recommending this new this delivery method for the new construction with some renovation of York Elementary. As a reminder, the Boys and Girls Club is part of it is time for the quarterly bond update. And I will journey over to that as soon as I find it. Oh, there it is, thank you. Right in front of me, Ms. Luton. Okay. All right. So you've noticed that Dr. Shaw is not able to be with us this evening, and so he developed a couple of items, one that's new to you still, but I will journey forward and share with you our progress, and we have so much to celebrate in with regard to our construction projects. So this slide reminds you of that draft sequencing that we provided to our Board of Education in this room. And this evening is that we are right here in dead center. So we are halfway through the progression of delivering on these projects and excited to tell you about it. This is a new visual that I added in here. Basically on the left is a chart of our 7 priority date, and on the right, of course, is our full district map, our geographic boundaries. But what you can see here, here's Sunshine right across here, and so of course we've got Delaware number 1, we've got Sunshine's number 3, and then we have Jarrett Middle School's number 7. We have our North of Sunshine, and those are buildings that needed much love and tender attention. So we're excited about the work that's taking place, and again, that just reminds you of our geographic layout. This is the slide that I went ahead and posted for the discussion on the architect's relative available funds, and that was following the assumption that the change orders would be approved this evening. So project update, the substantially completed list includes, as we know, Fulbright Early Childhood Center, Delaware Elementary, and then the secure entrances. It's super exciting that that work is completed as well. Almost to home plate. So we're anticipating completion October 4. As you know, we found it necessary to redirect students and staff to start school at the Portland Elementary building. And so that work is all being handled behind the scenes. We're approximately 2 months behind on schedule on that. Williams Elementary and Hillcrest High School, and construction documents are out to bid on Jarrett. As I mentioned, those bids will be coming forward for you in September. Then, this evening, we presented for you Architectural Services and Construction Manager at Risk for York Elementary. So here's secure entrance, lovely red oval, because August 2020 was our our commitment on completing the secure entrance work, and we have arrived. So we are all systems go for the first day of school for our secure entrances. This is substantial completion, but it's going to be finished before the first day of school. And then this gives you a visual of a few of those remaining sites. We've got McBride Elementary on the left, the main entrance there, Truman Elementary on the right. On this slide, Disney is on the left and Holland is on the right. Elementary, main entrance there. So, the teams working on these projects did some beautiful work in some of these buildings, and it really helped aesthetically, but also certainly functionally to keep students and staff safe. So Fulbright Early Childhood Center, as you will remember, so this visual shows you a basic classroom, a typical classroom at the building. And then this would be a collaborative activity space at Fulbright. It is just absolutely gorgeous there. Super exciting place for kids to go to the art and music classroom and storm shelter. This is a water table. I think it's also designed for sand, but that brings with it other complexities. But it's a tactile learning space for little ones. I have grandkids that love to play in water. So this is the outdoor space. I do want to highlight for you as you look at, I'm laughing now because I realized I was using the mouse. Oh, it shows up on there. Okay. I was thinking it wouldn't. The railing is not yet in this image, but the railing's been that'll be in prior to school starting. And then this is the PE indoor activity space. You can see a ladder and some other materials there in the background of the picture, but otherwise it's so bright and colorful and soft and fun, and kids are just going. This is Delaware Elementary now. That's the external view, and it is another gorgeous building and just fantastic, fantastic space for kids. Anybody who has context of the old Delaware, and then they go into this new Delaware. It is, and you know, a lot of our students that are being loved on and taught, how about that? They are students with special needs, and so they need accommodations, and that building did not accommodate those kids like they deserve to be accommodated. For us. So they're all special, but that one especially. So this image is the art room, and then this is a student collaboration space, kind of cool tables there that fit together. This is a view of the cafeteria, and I want to highlight so that space is unique and different compared to some other, and the design of this just kind of provides that divider space so they know this is my area to be in for eating.
Entirely unrecognizable.
I know, yeah. And so this is our, as you can see, the pictures are against the wall over there, and it will be used to a high level by not only our students but community members. That is a highly accessible and adaptable play space for kids at Delaware. I know we're still doing install, not sure what the status of that, but super exciting. And Stephanie Young and her team are just full of.
I'd like to see her face right
full of joy, yes. Okay, so Sunshine Elementary. So you won't be surprised that these next images will show that. So this is the main entrance, a view of the main entrance. I will say though that even when you look at these, things move quickly, you know, in those last stages, and so that can happen very easily. So this is a view of a 1930s classroom, one of our new classrooms. Then we have the library, and that's the community room space, and it's looking into the cafeteria area. And there's the cafeteria. And then this, of course, would be our okay. So moving forward, we have Boyd Elementary.
Girls being very nice.
This is a visual of dirt at Boyd Elementary. It's just a great thing. So that, as a reminder, we've got a total construction budget of $16.576. Construction began on June 2020, and we're projecting completion July 2021. So we're going to have another exciting year of projects moving quickly, and reporting on those. Williams Elementary, and we see dirt, and there's the. And we had a wonderful groundbreaking ceremony on August 11th, and so I have some pictures I've added in here. We've got kids that were tossing dirt, and it was just a tremendous celebration that day. Our Boys and Girls Club Chief Executive Officer, Brandy Harris, participated in this.
That's right.
Taking care of them before and after school. So the total project budget is 17.97 million, with construction budget of 15.7 nearly. Boys and Girls Club support 536,919. So basically, costs associated with their portion of the building, and then they lease the building from us and pay for operational costs as well. So construction will begin July 2020, and we anticipate completion August 2021. Hillcrest High School, Super Frederick, provided us with a touching moment as well, and we had kids there once again to help out. So that revised project budget is $35.88 million, and construction budget is $29.806. So the rest of that gap again is mostly construction. August 2020, 2020, and anticipated completion December 2022. So again, we are delivering these projects on time, on budget, over and over again, and we are delighted with that, and it's taken our community support to get there. Jarrett Middle School, we show the end of the time. So we did with the need to occupy Portland Elementary for our Sunshine Elementary students. We've modified our demolition date for Portland Elementary, and that is, of course, where the Jarrett Middle School will be constructed. So that's been pushed to October of 2020. We'll have our recommendation to you on the 22nd. We've got a project total estimate of $41.54 million and an original construction estimate of $32.97 million. The construction then will begin November of 2020 and complete August 2022 for that new school. So now we are anticipating June 2020, and the construction bid opening also June 2020, with a recommendation June 8th of 2021.
I knew what you meant. It's been a long day.
Yes, it's been a long day. And then recommend the bid June 8th. The million with a construction estimate of $0.610, and anticipated construction begins August 2021 and complete that 1 year later, August 2022. That's progress as promised, and my hope is that this video link is going to work. I have this for you this evening. So let's stop that. How about that? Okay, so that concludes. I obtain answers from Travis and send to you later.
Any questions for Carol at this point? I'll just make a comment that when we see recommendations and things we vote on, really great for us to visually remind us what is happening, boots on the ground. So I really appreciate the streamlined process, and I love driving by our new schools, and I saw on social media yesterday the Delaware team inside. So just to see our teachers and staff back in the building, it just, it touches my heart. So thank you for reminding us about the progress that's being made, and we're seeing the real life impact. Okay, we can move on to, thank you, Carol. We can move on to our next item. Okay, we will move forward to our report from administration, which we'll start with administrative reports.
I think you've heard a lot of the work going on tonight, so these won't be incredibly detailed, but I will ask the leadership team members here to give a brief comment on anything that they want to share. Yvonne?
Busy this summer with welcoming a new staff. I know he was introduced last board meeting, but his name is Jimmy Sode. He's going to be our coordinator for workforce development, so he's been very busy with what that plan will look like in developing a Grow Your Own program. And we also partner with the NAACP this summer to voting election, or voting cycle. And then we've just been very busy developing trainings, focus on equity for our fall training, as well as the additional trainings that we'll be doing for the reopening of school. So we've been very busy, but we're very excited for the upcoming year.
Really have been doing nothing in human resources. There's nothing going on with restaffing and supporting placement of our teachers. And so we've had the privilege in human resources to work with our staff, particularly over the last several weeks, to try and meet their needs. We know that we've not been able to meet each and every, but we certainly have done our best getting our staff back in place. And it's just been super exciting to talk with our staff and to hear them say, I just want to be back in the classroom. I just want to be back with my kids. And so a huge thank you to our teachers and our staff for their commitment and their willingness and desire to be we appreciate the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education's support and listening to us as a district, as well as to our colleagues around the state when we began having conversations months ago about substitute needs statewide. They not only listened, but they did take action, and Ms. Embry saw this follow-up. Those typically go into effect 10 days after they're filed with the Joint Committee on Rules and with the Secretary of State, so that will likely happen this week. And so the rules likely to be effective around the 1st of September. Emergency rules are effective for either 180 days or 30 legislative days, wearing at the earliest in mid-February at the latest, and then that time that allows the department to assess effectiveness, whether there's a need to extend, and really that will allow us the first semester to meet needs that may arise, and it allows PenMAC to work a program likely to be available online September 2nd. And so we will be recruiting and would encourage you, if you know members of our community who want to be involved with our students who were not able to get involved because of that 60-hour limitation, but they have attained a high school degree or have passed the high school exam. MAC is planning to utilize that third-party resource to help get individuals qualified. And we have, as a district, been able to have some input on what that training program will look like. It will look much like what we provide now. First, we'll continue to have our additional we expect through PenMAC, and we'll continue to provide those. And so we're appreciative of that opportunity, as are our neighbors around the state. Many of our colleagues around the state are really struggling to get to even 90% fill rates in a good year, and they are fully expecting some this school year. So once again, thank them, and I would please send folks our way who are interested in serving our students and serving in our schools.
Thank you much. Stephen?
Thank you. It was great to see many of you at the groundbreaking ceremonies this week, and we'll actually have the Judy for our new Fine and Performing Arts Magnet opportunity. So the celebrations will continue, and so we've been enjoying sharing those celebrations with the community through live streaming on Facebook and photos and other ways, and so we're seeing many people engaged, and we're very pleased with the attendance at our district. You can imagine, and so we provided an update late last week of the timeline for families so that they would know when to expect their schedule confirmation, when they could expect to pick up any technology support devices from their school, when they could expect to receive school supplies, and we'll that's where our focus is. Also, our transportation department has been communicating with those who are bus eligible and have registered for bus services, and those families will be receiving postcards in the mail. We'll confirm the timing of their bus stop and the location of their bus stop. And then finally, we had a great opportunity to shop had a number of our building principals express an interest in receiving training around thought exchange and using that tool to engage their school community, especially during these uncertain times. So I think that tool will be a great benefit to our system, and we'll be providing that follow-up training to our leaders very soon.
You already heard a lot about what we've been involved in on the academic side of the house for the last several weeks, but two things I'll note. One is that we welcomed Dr. Ron Woodard on August 6th. He is here and officially reported for duty as our new Executive Director of Secondary Learning. Welcome to Springfield. in the midst of a pandemic and reentry work, but he is making his rounds, asking his questions, connecting with his middle and high school principals, and we are so excited about the wealth of knowledge and information that he is going to bring forward, getting him in the flow of SPS. So that's been an exciting part of the work that we've been doing. So that's one piece. I think the second piece, just to note, is we have really focused and spent a lot of our time on the academic staffing and getting teachers back and prepared, and now we will be shifting services. So how we engage and support our ELL students and really start to engage with our special education families. Some DESE changes have made it so we will need to connect and convene on all of our IEPs ahead of them, and we're again going to ask for grace and flexibility as they navigate that and make their way through how we're going to provide these supports and services. And so that will be a huge part of what has already started last week and into this week, but I think that is the next layer relative to academics.
So I also have shared a number of things with you this evening. I will highlight for you simply 2 items, and one is very important in that it is our CARES funding. So I want you to know that we did make application for CARES funds through the Greene County. Expect that they'll make application very soon. They have a team of community members who are assessing all of the asks and evaluating for approval purposes. So that information will be coming soon. We also, on the same day, submitted, and this was on July 31st, I believe, we submitted for the school of the CARES funds, and we've already received that money. So I referenced earlier stipends. We've had a number of expenditures simply to open and purchase masks and cleaning supplies and that type of thing. So that will help shore up our bottom line, if you will. Then the other thing I want to for the audit services, and as you may remember, we have a purchasing audit to journey through, and then also a very extensive audit of the human resources system and internal workings, workflow perspective and compliance, that type of thing. So both we need people to get opened. We need that first payroll to occur at the end of September, and so the Human Resources Department does a lot of work to deliver that to the payroll team, and so we'll be providing you additional updates on the timeline, but at this point in time.
Just a couple closing items, if you don't mind, from my seat. Number one, thanks to all of you who were able to participate in a graduation ceremony, and those that couldn't because of travel, we missed you, right? And we wish you were there because it was amazing. And it was a wonderful opportunity, a wonderful celebration on so many levels, but as you know, the highest level is the fact that the performance of our teachers and our team and our students rose to a level that we've never achieved before. So I just want to thank you, and for us to reflect on the fact that that was delivered during a pandemic when we could have easily had the excuse and the reason to disconnect from our kids, but our leaders, our teachers, our counselors, everybody rallied to ensure that every one of those happens. More than 1,600 graduates, largest graduating class in the history of Springfield. Historically, again, the data point that the only one we found is one in the 89% range, so we've never cracked 90. We didn't just crack it, we broke it significantly, and we set a new bar. And a fluke. We put the systems in place in order to ensure that that continues to happen. So couldn't be more proud of the class of 2020 and the work that was delivered in order to get them there. And I'll follow that up with, that work was hard, but nothing compares to the work our teachers that have went through new training, trying to find new ways to meet our kids' needs around the clock. Our counselors have spent hours phone calling and rescheduling thousands of students over the last few weeks. To our bus drivers who are meals across our entire system in different ways at different times. I could not be more proud of the efforts of those on their boots on the ground and in leadership positions that have pulled that team together. If you think it's perfect, or if anybody thinks there's an opportunity for a perfect plan, they are sadly mistaken. You heard that tonight, right? You mentioned it great. 4 speakers, completely. We will adjust accordingly. We have perfect people working as hard as they know how in a pandemic on behalf of this community's kids. I'll go to war with them any day on behalf of this community. I just want to say that.
Our next agenda item is board comments. Anybody would like to make any comments? Now would be the time.
I have a comment. The term that I started, lots and lots of them, and the same challenges that SPS K through, or preschool through 12th grade is dealing with, we're dealing with on the college campus also. And I want to commend the district for the work that has gone forward. We are in a pandemic. This is flexibility. And there are no perfect answers or solutions. We will make mistakes, but we're going to do our best to serve our students and our community. And I appreciate the work that has gone forward, knowing how difficult it is. There are arguments on both sides, and I also to everyone who's been working so hard.
Gary?
Ozzy, I don't know if you all saw that Armando Johnson was named semifinalist Teacher of the Year for the state of Missouri. You didn't see that, so he's still in the running.
Yep, he's advanced to the next round. Exciting.
Any other board comments before I move on to upcoming meetings?
I would just, I think, echo what others have said. I mean, in the midst of a pandemic, in the state's largest district, the fact that I think we should be very proud of the work we have here. Now, there will be adjustments along the way, etc. But this is a plan that each one of us, I believe, can defend strongly, exuberantly perhaps, on a good day. And while this is not the ultimate metric, every single day to meet and is in the classroom every single day, and that's a pretty high bar for me. And I think we've cleared it. So good on SPS.
Any other comments? Right. Upcoming meetings, as it's been mentioned that the ribbon cutting ceremony for the Academy of Fine Arts Performing Arts is this Thursday, August 20th at 5:45. At a meeting scheduled for the 22nd. I believe those should already be on our calendar. And as most of you know, the 2020 annual MSBA conference will be held virtually this year. So we will be getting more information about those virtual options as I move us on to our next agenda item, which is Plus Delta.
We got our keynote speaker.
Okay.
CDC director will be live with us.
Great.
For the general session. So.
Who, what, Jerry?
CDC, director of the CDC.
Oh, okay.
Our next agenda item is Plus Delta. If you want to write any notes, Plus or Delta, you can turn those in, Post-it notes, and hand those to our board secretary as our meeting concludes. At this time, our following this meeting to discuss legal matters as provided in section 610.021. Someone like to make?
So moved.
Jill with the first, Sharita with the second. Any discussion? Hearing
It's not close.
Motion passes. Thank you.